Check, check.
Oh yeah. Okay. How do I? Oh. Okay. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. So my name's Shakil Abdullah. I wanted to do opening remarks very briefly with everyone. So this is the third annual Artificial Intelligence Summit for New Orleans. This is a major initiative. Yes, many applause. This is a major initiative by the 1111 Philosophers Group. The theme of this year is entangled. This comes at a very important time in artificial intelligence. The rapid landscape is constantly evolving for artificial intelligence, surrounding legislation, community involvement, nonprofit sectors, and the list truly goes on. Um, oh, I probably should have got more. I want to also thank Blake, who's been very supportive of this initiative, and then Joseph as well, and the many volunteers and organizers. Please give them a big round of applause. Yes. So, with the Artificial Intelligence Summit, this will be a long 3-day event, each day starting around about 9:45 to 10 and then ending around 6 p.m. So, over the course of the 3 days, this will really encompass a lot of different subjects that we really feel the public and the state and across the nation really want to develop and further involve in. So, I feel like we can briefly get into that really. So, yeah, another applause. Uh-huh.
Um, and so you'll see it evolve. And every year I like to see the evolution. This year we actually have a screen to start, so we're already ahead of last year. And we also have more registered people starting than last year. Some of the highlights today, there's great things both in this room and in the education center downstairs. Everybody here is friends; they kind of know where it is. And then everything is also streamed live. There's a pretty a good group of people who are going to be watching live. There should be volunteers around. There's snacks around if you want them. And so we have everything there for you. Starbucks is offering free coffee. Thank you, Starbucks, I guess, woohoo. Uh, and then Brother Jay is offering $11 shot espressos. So I'm curious. Brother Jay's at war with Starbucks, so we'll see what happens. Um, and then I also invite you all on Tuesday to come check out what we're doing outside. Um, we have, thanks to this guy, Matt Mullenweg, who founded WordPress, he donated 50 of these really cool computers called Daylights. And so we will be working with students, and the 1111 Philosophers Group has a workshop we do with students that kind of teach students the fundamentals of AI. And so we'll have a bunch of students outside. Hopefully, they'll probably be wandering inside because it's going to get colder. But that'll be on Tuesday. Um, this is a completely volunteer-run festival, so it's cool. This is how like Jazz Fest and all of those great festivals started, with people who just cared about it and building and building. And every year we see something a little bit different. So thank you all. I think if you see anybody with a name tag, you can ask them. They know about what's going on. And yeah, feel free to pitch in where you can because we're just doing this because we love it. But thank you. And I think, what's the next talk? What's
And we
up
broke
here?
our record for registration this year.
Oh yeah, woohoo! We got 116 people registered. So over 3 days. And so like one of the other reasons, like one of the critiques that people have that I think we're not going to ever take about No AI is like, man, you seem stretched thin. Like 3 days, like you're a teeny festival. What's that? What's up with that? Well, we actually, like, one of the most important things about No AI is this stage and coming to the stage. And even if you're, like, some people will speak to big packed groups, other people will speak to smaller groups. But, like, the important thing is getting on stage. And we want to make sure that we encourage everyone to have a voice and an opinion, especially in this important thing like AI. AI spending, like data, mostly around data centers, accounted for 95% of GDP growth last quarter. So like, it's a few people excited about it, but it's a huge important thing for our economy and our world. So the most important thing we could do is provide a stage. There's people taking photos. You'll have some nice photos of you up here, and then you'll also meet people because like this crowd here, let's call them like the front row seaters, and folks outside have come because we've done this again and again and again, and because we've remain inclusive. So I put that out there as like as a challenge to everybody to get up on stage, and if you don't get on stage this year, get on stage next year. But this thing's a dynamic. I can't tell you what to expect by Tuesday. It's going to be fun.
Yay! So thank you again, Blake. I think right now we're going to do 2 sessions happening simultaneously at 10. So one is actually with Blake again, downstairs in the classroom, and then another one will be in the upstairs theater, which I believe is still just here. And that will be with Curtis Cummings, and then that will explore the future of AI flows through Louisiana. So if you're interested in no robot teaching toddlers about AI, go with Blake, downstairs classroom. And if you want to stay upstairs talking about the future of AI in Louisiana, stay here with Curtis. It's live recorded.
Do you need a laptop or anything? Yeah, I have all that. We have all that.
Let's see. HDMI. Yes, I think so. Excellent. That goes also in here. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect design. This laptop. Very smart.
You can adjust the situation.
Excellent.
Cool. There you go.
There's probably like internet or something, right? I do also have my phone. It's fine. Okay.
Oh, there's just a
Excellent.
message that came through. I don't know what this means, but it does say anyone with the blue Nissan Texas plates is getting towed from
Sick.
Texas plates. Let you know.
Well, I'm from Texas. No, I'm not.
There's nothing I can do about it.
Hello. So thank you all for being here. I guess I should wait an extra minute. I'm a stickler for the rules and schedules. that's enough waiting. Thank you for joining me here today at NOAI. It's a great honor to be here. I'd like to thank the organizers who had the poor judgment to allow me to speak for being here. If you don't know me, my name is Curtis Cummings. I'm a software engineer. I've been a technical consultant in software engineering for the last 10 years. I currently work for a company called Pixel Dash Studios. We're a game studio based out of Baton Rouge. And I also help run NOGD, which is a registered 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to growing the New Orleans game dev community. Got a few little slides about that. So we run the game dev community. We host meetups every month. We host game jams. We do public classes with, we did public classes with the New Orleans Public Library at one point. We're trying to expand into that some more. We run a hardware donation racket, so if you have a bunch of computers that you're going to throw away, you can just give them to us and we'll figure out something to do with them. We were able to provide Ghost Garden Games, an all-female-led studio in Baton Rouge with a set of high-powered gaming workstations that we got on donation from InXile Entertainment on Oak Street. So by partnering with InXile, we were able to just save those computers from a landfill and give them to people that were able to start using them and build a company and that kind of stuff. We have a Discord. If you want to see anything that NOGD does, we do meetups, we do game jams, classes, and we do donations. And I said all this stuff, so good. We got through that. So let's go over what we're here to talk about today. We just got through the introduction, so congratulations. You've made it this far. We're going to start off our discussion by talking about who owns the future. And then we're going to look at how technology has really revolutionized our society. I'm going to be very reductionist. I'm going to misrepresent data, and I'm going to try to convince you the world is bad. So buckle up for that one. Then I'll go over an alternative, a way that I see we can build society moving forward, some considerations for that alternative, and then we'll conclude with people throwing rocks and vegetables at me. I want to add a disclaimer. I'm not a college-educated man. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm able to figure things out. I'm very good at that. I may not be educated or smart, but I sure am clever. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. So let's start off by asking, who owns the future? Think about that. It's kind of a heady question. What does it mean to own the future? I don't know. But what I can do is tell you who owns the present. So our world, our economy, the digital world is built on literal physical infrastructure. I don't know if this text is too small for you to see, but at the bottom layer here, we have the literal internet. If you don't know, the internet is a physical thing. It is a giant computer network that connects everyone together. So that physical infrastructure exists. It was built by the United States federal government, and now it's owned by, Google, Amazon, Oracle, all these wonderful companies that have done great things for us. The next step of this three-tiered cake is the web. A lot of people don't know the difference between the internet and the web, but that is the difference. The internet is the actual infrastructure. The web is it's the World Wide Web. That's where all of our web apps, our websites, all of our services, all that kind of stuff. So ChatGPT, that's built in the second tier on top of the infrastructure, the bottom layer. In the third layer, we have us, the lowly communities and creators dancing for crumbs, providing all the content that provides value for these services and products on the second layer. Something that's very alarming is that only a handful of companies manage all of it. That's not an exaggeration. Literally almost all of the internet is hosted by Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, and Alibaba. So just think about that. And that's not a conspiracy theory. I'm not crazy, because AWS went down 3 weeks ago and everyone freaked out. So That's not a lie. I'm not crazy. And when people build digital products and apps and services, usually what they're doing is they're renting out space and infrastructure, or making a wrapper for some platform that exists, or are producing content. Those are like the three ways we primarily engage with the digital economy and the digital world. So let's talk about how technology has really revolutionized our society. So with the way things are built and structured, companies that own resources, which should essentially be public goods because it's like how we have to connect with each other, just like the road that brought me from my house to this museum. The way companies are built is they provide services that extract value out of specific localized areas. This is kind of abstract, so don't worry if you're not really understanding what I'm trying to say here, but everything that is unique and special about a certain place goes to die on the World Wide Web so that it can be homogenized and nice and smoothly coded so it can be sold to any number of markets and metrics. But if we did something different, we could keep all that value here to the people that live in this community, the people that we have to see every day and have to share the city with. So before I go into my alternative, I'm going to talk about some examples. So Spotify, we all love Spotify. It's the best way to listen to whatever music you want at any moment. You can listen to music for free at any time. You just need a radio. They play it over the air for free. It's crazy. You don't get to tell them, well, you can call them. You can call them and say hey, put Beyonce on or something. And you still get some of the same value that streaming platforms give. But what radio also gives us is a beacon of communication for our area. People that live here. I don't know if you've ever been on a long road trip going through rural America, but there's a lot of Christian radio stations. Some people live so far from other people that hearing church on the radio is their form of community. You know what I mean? Not that that's great, but it's something. But here in New Orleans, we're special. We have WWOZ, WTOL, WWNO, Q93, all the other great radio stations. They keep the pulse of the New Orleans spirit alive. Every hour on the hour, WWOZ goes through every single live concert at every single bar in the city. Most cities don't have that. You just don't have that because most people are listening to XM Radio or Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal or whatever. And I don't know if you knew this, but Spotify is currently being sued for not managing troves of illegitimate streams through bots so that they could inflate numbers of big national artists like Drake, which gets them more money from advertisers, which makes it harder for smaller businesses to advertise on these platforms. Let's look at DoorDash. I'm not a perfect man. My sins are laid bare for all to see. I use DoorDash. What I found through going through my receipts on DoorDash is that there's a delivery fee and a service fee for every single order. Every time you order DoorDash, literally 20% on top of the cost of the food is charged to you in form of these fees. You're like, oh, well, I pay for DashPass. You're even more of a fool than I. I'm just kidding. But we're paying 20% tax. In Louisiana, we already have the highest combined sales tax. And we're giving another 20% to some jerks in California or Delaware, sorry. So what I want to express is there's a different solution here. If we had some sort of, distributed infrastructure that was owned by the community, right? DoorDash has to charge us 20% for their hosting costs or whatever. They get it way cheaper than that. But imagine if that 20% went to the community that you lived in. What if there were a structure to charge people on top of the cost of goods and services to have that money be recirculated to the community? I don't know of a single thing that can circulate money like that. Someone who's good at money can tell me. I think it's called taxes, but whatever. So if you set up these centers, and I like to use the example of a public library. That's something concrete. People can wrap their head around. I don't think necessarily libraries should be these places, but a place where we have computing resources, servers for people to host web apps, GPUs to train data models, all kinds of stuff that people who want to use technology to better themselves, their lives, or their community can have access to those resources to make that dream a reality. There are too many young people today that are, they grow up with smartphones. I'm a young guy, I'll admit, but I'm slightly older than most young people, and I grew up using the web, the World Wide Web. And it was different, we didn't have these mega corporations worth billions of dollars creating new and fun ways to hypnotize us and to keep scrolling endlessly so that we can see more ads and be influenced in whatever way that who knows what these guys want us to think. Anyway, so what the functions of these computer centers is fourfold in my mind. There's an education component. If we have these centers and we have these places where all of this stuff can happen, we can teach people how to use computers. There's jobs for data annotation services. People will pay you just go on a computer and say yep, that's a picture of a dog. Yep, that's a picture of a chair, so that they can train AI models to recognize certain things in images. You can also use this as an opportunity to teach elderly people how to use a computer. This isn't a super complex job that needs to be done, but you can frame it in a way that's helpful. Because if we teach people how technology works and how to make use of it, then they can't be bamboozled by whatever dancing holograms on the cave wall may appear. It's good for entrepreneurship as well. You want to give people the resources to succeed. The reason why Silicon Valley has been the big place for all the tech industry, it's because it's where all the money is, Silicon Valley was built by defense companies and stuff who, sold technology to the American military and the government and foreign governments as well. And they got a whole shit ton of money. I don't know if you know what happened between 1942 and 1995, but there was a lot of wars everywhere. God bless America. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, if you give people resources, then people will find ways to use the resources to better their lives and the people around them. That's just, I think we can all agree on that point, maybe. This is a hub for culture as well. And I think something that gets lost in a lot of conversations about AI and art and stuff is that these big AI models run by OpenAI or closed AI, they are taught on everything. And that has, well, if you're making a large language model that wants to make a statistical model of what someone would say given a certain prompt, that makes sense. But when you're trying to make art, you have a direct vision, and you, the person, the creator, or whatever, sees that vision through and creates it. When you have a training set that's so global in its reach like that, you can't get a specific vision. And I think anyone that uses AI, image generation or video generation, will know it's not great at maintaining the exact same thing. If you make a drawing and you say, hey, animate this, it'll animate some other drawing that looks kind of like yours, but it's not the same one. If we can teach models to represent our specific culture and our specific perspective and our stories, we can make AIs that are more useful to us because they reflect the values and the information of the community and not the values and information stolen from all reaches of the web and used to sell us $200 a month subscriptions to burn some GPUs. There'll also be research hubs, you know. Having more digital resources, more places is only better because, like, you know, a lot of schools in more rural areas can go to that place to have, you know, computer classes or whatever. Schools, universities don't need to invest in their own infrastructure. They can invest in community infrastructure, and it helps everyone. So I think this matters because, as Jane Jacobs says, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. Jane Jacobs, very wonderful lady. She probably wouldn't love my talk, but she had some good ideas. But what's important here is that local ownership will create more local opportunity. Think about like DoorDash and stuff. What is that? Who is that 20% fee benefiting? It's not benefiting anybody here. Like when I order food, I'm just gonna harp on this because it pisses me off like every other day. But when I order food and like there's something wrong with it, if I call Ben's Pizza and get a po' boy and they forget my fries, I call Ben's Pizza. I'm like, yo, bro, I got my fries. I ain't got my fries. And they're like, all right, sorry. You just come by and get them. That's cool. If someone on DoorDash forgets my fries, do I yell at the driver? Do I yell at the restaurant? Do I yell at the app? They'll all tell you to yell at someone else. I don't want to yell at anybody. I just want some fucking French fries. Sorry. Anyway. Shared resources also equals shared resilience. You know, if AWS goes down because they're the biggest player on the block and they're a very prime target for denial of service attacks, we shouldn't all, like, why does it matter that some yahoos in Silicon Valley are getting their computers pinged to death when I just need to use an ATM down the street from my house? It doesn't make sense that we have to process everything everywhere in just like a handful of little spots. We should be able to distribute that workload to us, like around our community in a smaller space. And you know, the classic argument is about economies of scale. It's cheaper for these people to provide these services. How much cheaper? Like, how are they making more money than God providing these services if it's like so costly? I'm getting ahead of myself. So there are a couple considerations. Funding. So in order for this to really work, we need a lot of money behind it. We need people to think more about, you know, what is the profit structure, the profit plan going to benefit? When it's a corporation like Amazon, their primary goal is to make more money and more value for their stockholders, which will come at the expense of our conveniences in our lives because they're not concerned with that. They're concerned with getting you to spend more and more money on their services. And they will use their resources to figure out more ways to convince you to do that. And we should say no to that. We need governance and transparency. The only way this really works is if there's no closed doors. And that's kind of like the core message here is that, like, when things are owned by the community, there's real accountability, you know? If the locally generated AI model goes around calling itself the robot Fuhrer, you know, someone should have to answer it for why it's saying that, you know? Someone put something in there. So governance and transparency is very important. Education pipelines, like this kind of future can't exist if we don't teach kids about technology and how it works. Like we've gotten to a point where children just like don't know how to use computers. It's like a weird, sad reality. But when the world got taken offline from the pandemic, we weren't like, society was not ready for that. Like, kids lost like 3 years of school not knowing how to set up like the infrastructure for student learning and stuff. And if we had these kinds of platforms where there was a data center like at 5 places in the state, like Louisiana, or sorry, I call New Orleans, Louisiana, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Alexandria, Shreveport, Monroe. If there were data centers there and everyone in the surrounding areas of all those data centers had fiber connections and everything was like nice and resilient, we wouldn't have a guy with $1 trillion saying, oh, well, why don't you just beam everything through space? That seems way more efficient. And the last consideration is cultural preservation. We want to create a future where the culture bearers are the ones that get to profit and live nice, sustainable lives. The people that make all the reason for the connection that we seek through the internet and the web and all these social media platforms, those people need to be the ones that benefit, not the people in a C-suite boardroom. Education is like a really big deal, an aspect of this. I think like education programs, especially for the youth, are very good. If we want people to build a future that's better, we need to teach kids specifically how technology works and how to use it responsibly and sustainably. During the Cold War, when the United States was in a race with the Soviet Union to get to the moon, you know what the government did? They crammed kids into schools. They worked super hard to teach every kid about science, math, and engineering so that a couple of years later, some of those kids will be in college and work for NASA under some disreputable folks, and they're going to go to the moon. But yeah, cultural preservation is another important thing. So I was in band in school, so I learned how to play music. We marched in Mardi Gras parades. It was a great way to, associate with the long tradition of our city and our culture and the place that we live. If you're like a kid in New Orleans and you and your friends get like some instruments from a pawn shop or something and you want to play music, you got to go to a store and you got to buy a book of music. That sucks. They don't have music books in libraries. I don't know if you knew that, but they don't. And it's ridiculous. We should be like digitizing, that's another topic, sorry. But we can digitize artifacts of our culture and preserve them forever. Think about like Roblox or Fortnite or something, where kids have access to tools where they can build their own worlds. What if they had like an asset of like like a digital library of New Orleans cultural artifacts that were like 3D scanned or photogrammetry, whatever, to turn into 3D models that they can use in their Roblox worlds or whatever it is kids do on computers these days. We can train AI to reflect our local identity and the values of our city and our community, and we can lead the way in developing community-led data projects. There's all kinds of data. Data is just a description of something, like any literal thing that exists. And I don't know if you've like been alive for a while, but a lot of things exist, and there's data everywhere all around us. And what we've been able to do with computers is to categorize and inventory all this data and find out information and detect patterns in the data and find trends and make bigger and more beautiful things. If we have these computer centers or data centers, we could be just paying people like minimum wage or whatever to catalog data, annotate stuff, and make, provide for our own development. So I live in Chalmette. I don't know if you've been to Chalmette, but there's a lot of like car shops, boat shops and stuff. And I was thinking, I ordered this little OBT2 sensor that I can plug in my laptop and run a program to read the diagnostic stuff in the car. I was just thinking, like, what if like one of these repair shops just had every set of like ODB2 scanner readings that they'd done in every car they repair. Like these dudes probably repair like 10,000 cars a year. You know, you annotate that and like, oh yeah, this one had a misfiring cylinder, this one had this, whatever. You can make a diagnostic AI platform. Do you just plug into a car, it reads all the things and says, okay, your car's fucked up. And you're like, all right, I already knew that part. But yeah, a million ideas. That's something I just came up with today. So what I want everyone to take away from this is that we need to support public digital infrastructure. We cannot just let these companies siphon away all of our money for what, I ask you. What have they really done for us? Support education and youth programs and build businesses that invest in your community, that really help the people around you, you know? As Martin Luther King Jr. said, we're tied together in the single garment of destiny. And yeah, that's it. I'll take any questions if anyone has any. What you got?
I'll do two, one kind of a negative, one a positive.
Okay, good. Hit me.
So, first of all, I feel like this kind of ignores the reason why data centers are in the places that they are, which is
Of course.
like stuff like cost of electricity, cost of cooling, closeness to tier 1 infrastructure, stability of electricity. I mean, I could say New Orleans in particular would be a really, really bad place to put a data center because we're bad in all those ways. Who would host their website here? So like, or who would host any sort of critical infrastructure?
Well, I think that's part of it. We need to fix that. And paying 20% on top of, you know, things that we get from a place down the street to some corporation in California is not helping us fix any of that.
Sure, but hurricanes happen regardless.
Yeah.
I'll give you the positive one. So a couple years ago, I ran a project for a climate tech company, and this unfortunately didn't go anywhere. But the idea was to use a technology called solid, not the crypto stuff. It's Tim Berners-Lee stuff that he's been working on since like 2000. And the idea was to build a distributed network of places where people could, of trusted organizations throughout the United States, eventually the world, where people could host their own data, retain ownership of it, and then set up a system by which that bits of that data could be queried and even compensated for. This would fit in very well with
Yeah, that rocks.
structures like that. Yeah. If you want to talk about that more, I've got like a whole architecture in my head that
Hell
went
yeah.
anywhere, unfortunately, because Bezos closed the book.
Of course. Classic
Well,
Jeff.
also the company collapsed. But that was it.
Anyone else? What you got?
So what do you think would be an incentive for the big tech like DoorDash to come down over here in New Orleans and like perform like a distributed system, given the cost dynamics?
My legal representation advised me not to answer that question. What you got? 3 minutes? All right. Well, I can get off now. Thank you.
I was going to his question about like data centers. I think like China's doing data centers in the ocean, like underneath the water.
Yeah.
Like,
I've seen
maybe-
stuff like that.
Maybe New Orleans might be, if it's able to utilize the Gulf and
Or the
have
lake.
a farm out there, then maybe it actually could be a place for a data center.
Yeah. It could be something. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how to do this. I just don't like corporations. But yeah, thank you.
Please give her a very big round of applause for that. Yes. And again, Curtis will be around, so definitely try to communicate, continue the dialogue. That's what's really important about the AI Summit. Next, there are 2 sessions happening again. So in the upstairs theater, which is here, you'll have Knut Berthelsen, which is right here. And then his talk will be AI's Green Revolution, Debunking Myths and Unlocking Environmental Solutions. And then if you want to go downstairs, out of breath. This will be Debate Lab, Revolutionizing Civil Discourse in the Digital Age by Barrington Herbert. So these both start at about now. So here, Knut, please come up. Yes, round of applause for him. You need an adapter? You need an adapter? Okay. Well, hold on, slight technical difficulty. I'm gonna get the Mavis later.
Good morning, everyone. How are you guys doing? Good. I'm going to get started because I don't think I need my slides for the very start. Okay, so I'm talking today about what we ended up calling in the program AI's Green Revolution. And my main message is really that we keep hearing that AI is bad for the environment, and I don't think it is. And I have some data to show that, and I have some thoughts on that topic. And I start with a little story because a little while back, I was at my favorite wine store, and there's a nice lady there who is not an artificial intelligence; she's an organic intelligence, and she knows more about the wines I will like than I do, which is lovely, right? To have something like that in the neighborhood. But for once, I actually had a question that stumped her. There was something, I can't remember what it was, about this one particular bottle of wine. I was like, she said, I should look that up, but not using ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is bad for the environment. Okay. Now, this was not the first time I heard this, right? It's not the last time I've heard it. You've probably all heard it. You may even have said it, right? Because there's just something you think about. It's like, okay, I trigger this thing, I write a question, and then somewhere in this big, soulless, giant box, there's some like GPUs or TPUs that start humming extra hard, and it sucks the water out from the poor people who live around there, and it uses all the energy, and we have to burn more coal, and it just it feels wrong, right? So, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I started thinking more about it, and I was like, what, I should talk about this at Noai this year. So let me start compiling some more information about this. And I want to give credit right away to a gentleman named Andy Masley, who I found had done everything that I wanted to do and more, and put it together in a beautiful Substack that I'll give you the link for that one later, but it's andymasley.substack.com. And I found that I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about how much energy we use, right? So I started looking it up, and wow, there's a lot. We use a lot of energy for a lot of random things. We use a lot of water for a lot of random things. So I figured, let's think about this bottle of wine. Is that yes, perfect. Let's think about this bottle of wine. I wonder how many typical ChatGPT prompts, right, I could do before I used as much energy as it took. Thank you very much. Before I used as much energy as it took to get me this bottle of wine. Who wants to guess? How many ChatGPT prompts for the one bottle of wine that I bought at Swirl that had been, the wine had been made, the bottle had been made, the two had been introduced, they'd been shipped over here. It was a white wine, kept cold. Counting it all? Give me a guess. How many ChatGPT prompts? What's that? Thousands, 10,000, 18,000. Right? So one bottle of wine, and this is just the energy, equaled 18,000 ChatGPT prompts. But it's not just, when we talk about the environment, it's not just about energy, right? Very popular these days is talk about water. So how many bottles of wine per ChatGPT prompt do you think if I'm just looking for water consumption? Anyone? I mean, liters, but yeah. So equivalence here, 18,000 ChatGPT prompts is enough same energy as one bottle of wine. Well, for water, it's 25,000. Right? And this is just, wine is not the best example for this whole thing. It was just the most obvious for me because of how this whole thing started. So there are a couple of others. Like if I wanted to eat a burger with that wine, just the meat, nothing else that goes into a standard patty. A little bit better on the energy, 6,000, but 68,000 ChatGPT prompts in water, right? So something like 600 gallons per something. All these numbers are confusing. And I think this is sort of what I'm at this point, right? We're so rich that it's completely rational for us to be ignorant of these things, which is insane when you think about it from a historical point of view, and lovely, right? It used to be, and there's data on this, like you had to work so and so many hours in the field to afford a candle that burned this much for this long so you could read your Bible a little bit before you went to bed, right? There's a long way from that to us, like, I have no clue, right? And I might be more ignorant than your average person for all I know, but still, maybe I'm more rational. But I honestly have no clue what most of these things mean. It's like, there's a kilowatt here, some watts here, and a megawatt here, and wow, they're terawatts too now. And I'm from Norway. I grew up on the metric system, so at least I'm not entirely confused by the kilo and all that, but it's still pretty much Greek to me, right? And I think that's sort of the core for why when someone says to you many enough times that, ChatGPT is bad for the environment, all that, you're just going to internalize that. Be like, yeah, of course it is. Big box, bad people. Yeah, that can't be good, right? We should do something else, right? So AI doesn't actually use that much energy, right? And quite a lot of what you read about it is wrong because it's based on outdated numbers, right? So the most recent 2025, ChatGPT uses 0.34 watt hours, while Gemini uses 0.24 watt hours. What you typically hear, if you read sort of a couple of papers and stuff on this, they say it's 3 watt hours, right? That was true for GPT-2, but that's a long time ago, especially in AI time, right? GPT-2 was sort of like a pioneering piece of an LLM that was absolutely awful compared to what we have today, and it was incredibly inefficient, and all these other things are more efficient. Now, I don't need to get into a fight with anyone about this because if it is 3 watt hours instead of 0.3, you just add a 0 to all my numbers, and they're still much better than all the other things, right? I'm still not worried about it if it was 3. Right? I'll show you guys, right? So back to this Andy Masley again. It's like, what does all this mean? What are these watts and stuff like that, right? So for ease of things, I'll use just 0.3 watt hours, which is sort of somewhere between Gemini and ChatGPT, right? I think he actually used 0.34 for this. So this is Andy Masley again. So one ChatGPT prompt equals 18 seconds more of a light bulb on, 3 minutes of leaving a wireless router on. I can instantly see a way I can get rid of all my ChatGPT guilt had I had it by just why don't I just turn my Wi-Fi off at night? I mean, I'm sleeping, right? You can catch it there. I feel good already because I don't have a gaming console, so that's good, right? So 6 seconds of that, right? And then, I try not to vacuum too much. It's bad for the environment, right? But I do microwave. And again, it's like 1 second is very little. 10 seconds is also very little, right? So I don't want to get bogged down too much in the exact numbers here. That's not really the main point. But at the end of the day, it is math, right? So it's like you can believe or not believe the sources that say this is how much energy these LLMs use, and then I think there's very little disagreement about how much an incandescent light bulb uses and some of these other things, and then you can sort of weigh them up against each other. So I mentioned GPT-2 is old, right? But it's not just like GPT-2 is old. Like, things here are moving rapidly, right? So here, this is from a report by Google called Measuring the Environmental Impact of Delivering AI at Google, at scale. Came out earlier this year. And the important thing here, you might be able, it's a little small so you can see, but anyway, I removed 2 pieces. This is like, I'm too used to teaching, right? I'm gonna take something out here and have you guys guess, right? So we get some audience participation again. So they say, blah, 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 blah. We also show that it has driven a X reduction in energy consumption and a X reduction in carbon footprint. So should we get some guesses on that? How many, and not if you actually read this, please, right? But let's assume you didn't. How many times better has Gemini gotten from May 2024 to May 2025 in terms of energy? Looking for a number that ends with X. 2x. I hear 2x. Do I have any higher? 10x. 33x. Right? In 1 year with just Gemini. Right? For the median Gemini app text prompt over 1 year. Carbon footprint, 44x. Because they found better energy, I guess. I don't know. I haven't actually read that part. And again, I'd be super happy here with 22x too, right? Which I actually erroneously had in my notes. That's why I remembered it as, and I checked. It's like, let me just check that thing. Just make sure I don't make a total ass of myself, and it was 2x. And it's like, oh, it's 33. Oh, okay, yeah, that's good. I like that. So we talked about CO2 then, right? So what about this whole CO2 footprint thing? So I use a little bit of my CO2 footprint to have Imagine 3, 4, whichever one is baked into Google Slides these days, make this lovely footprint. I kind of like that. So carbon footprint. One ChatGPT query, again, is the equivalent to streaming a video for 35 seconds. So, we all do that. Probably streamed about 3 hours. We're catching up on Stranger Things. Doing little reruns, we're ready, right? Uploading 9 photos to social media. Driving a sedan for 4 feet. Using a laptop for a minute. Or running a space heater for 0.7 seconds. Obviously, there are more here, like AC is fun, right? We know that. But there are a couple of things I want to point out. So the first one, people would be like, well, yeah, of course, streaming is bad. It's data centers and all that stuff. Like, it's really horrible how much energy we use streaming these days, right? It's like, now, so close your eyes and try to remember how far it was from your house to the nearest Blockbuster. And then put yourself in a pickup truck and drive to Blockbuster. Pick up a physical copy of a DVD and bring it home and watch it, and then return it again the next day. I mean, you are way above in your carbon footprint than any sort of streaming. Because, it turns out, as I'm sure some of you guys know, data centers are very, very efficient. That's why we build them like that, right? They shove a whole bunch of hardware together, they optimize it, and they run them, as hard as they can, as long as they can. Unlike, say, my computer that is mostly in my bag, right? And my car that is mostly in my driveway, right? So these are not bad things. Next thing, which I think Andy Masley again made a point of this somewhere that I really liked. I'm going to use that one again. Using a laptop for 1 minute. So basically, if you ask ChatGPT for something, and it gives you a reply You use more energy reading that reply in 1 minute from your computer than ChatGPT used generating it. Right? So just sort of like trying to put things into perspective a little bit. So how do you actually reduce your carbon footprint if that's what you want? Right? That's a perfectly honorable goal to have. So yeah, you could get rid of your car, switch to green heating. You can avoid 1 transatlantic flight. Right? And I can't remember what these things actually are in the measurements, but you can sort of see the point here is that there are a whole bunch of things that have a big impact if you do them, and then there are things that have gradually less and less so, and at the very bottom, as a rounding error almost, is, well, you could also ask ChatGPT 180,000 times fewer, right? So, not really the main impact there. But what about the future? I mean, we know these things are growing, right? There's like, sure, maybe you're right, but it's growing so fast. It's unprecedented. No one has ever grown anything as much as AI has, right? I mean, that's somewhat true, but this is looking at in terawatt hours. Now we're up at those. Projected power from the International Energy Agency used for these things. And the first message I just see here is like, this is not an outlier. It's not like, oh, wow, data centers are crazy, right? Sure, we're going to have 530 terawatt hours more coming on between 2024 and 2030 and for data centers. But yeah, I mean, space cooling is more, appliances, all those electric cars. I mean, it's sort of, it's not something crazy, right? And there are all sorts of debates about this too, and we're going to talk a little bit about where you put the data centers and all these other things. But it's funny because it's being attacked from both sides, right? You have a lot of people are saying AI and data centers have sort of become the same for a lot of people now. So let's just assume that like a data center is bad, right? Because it's bad for the environment. And then others say data centers are bad because they make my electricity more expensive so that I might use less, right? You got to pick one of those. Another example, yeah, but you break it down. But first, they use all this energy to train their models. This, by the way, is training models when you ask for a generated. So for training models, you use a lot of it, right? And actually, which is true. A lot of energy goes into training models, right? I mean, a lot of energy goes into making a car the first time, too. A lot of energy goes into a lot of things, and it's then divided by every single use by every single person, again, and all that stuff. But I found this one about Grok. So, like, if there's one where they really don't care in the environment, it's going to have to be Grok, right? So that's got to be at least the worst of them. So let's look at it then. Okay, so these comparisons here, you might see better on that screen, but it's fairly easy when I go through it. So the first one is cost, which we don't really care that much about it, but $490 million to train Grok 4, $1.8 billion for the world's largest cruise ship there, right? Then $100 million for scale, I guess, the gray box there. But the energy is what we're thinking about, right? So Grok 4 training used 310 million kilowatt hours for that. So based on that little gray box, that tells me that's about 30 windmills, right? So it's a year production of 30 windmills went into Grok 4. And to be fair, I'm not a big fan of Grok 4. Like, I think it's fairly, I mean, Grok 5 might be really good. And it's really impressive that they went in about a year from no Grok to basically about as good as the others. So it's not, I don't want to, trash them or anything. But it's like annual use for a town of 10,000 people is 800. Yeah, so it's like a few thousand people's annual use went into training Grok 4, right? Then we get to water. 750 million liters. I mean, it sounds a lot because, let's see, that would be 300 Olympic-sized swimming pools went into this, right? But you know what, the big one at the 1.2 billion liters, that is the annual water usage for 1 square mile of farmland. All right? And I don't hear a whole lot of people complaining about that. It's just like, it sounds a lot because, you know what, 750 million is a high number, and no one knows what a liter is anyway, right? So it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. right? Compared to what else we use water for. Also, I have some issues with the whole use when it comes to water. Okay, it's not like Grok shot it into space when it was done with it, right? I mean, it's like there's a bit of a system when it comes to water on this planet, right? So if it came in kind of cold and then it came out a little bit warmer on the other side, so what, right? Even if it came in kind of warm on one side and it evaporated on the other side, I mean, it's going to come down somewhere, right? So it's more about sort of local issues, but we'll get into that. And then for the carbon footprint, I like that one. So the little box there, that's the annual emissions of one plane. All right, so this whole training thing here was slightly, what should I say, that's more than 3 planes, I guess. A little bit more than 3 planes in a year is the carbon for that, right? So again, if carbon is what you care about, I guess you fly less, right? There's some other things. Okay, water. Everyone's talking about water now. That's like the new thing. Like, what was the article? ChatGPT is so thirsty. It drinks a bottle of water for every query. There's like some breathless article about that. Obviously not correct. So here, again, and this is the first time you can actually see andymansley.substack.com. I just want to make sure I give him credit because he certainly has earned it, as has the gentleman behind understanding.ai, who has some good illustrations, and I use one of them here. So this is the national daily water usage by category in billions of gallons, right? So there's mining up on top for 4, which in the U.S. is not, we're not talking about like rare earth minerals that go into the GPUs because we get those from China, as we know, right? Household leaks. So this was a big one for me. I'm like, what? This keeps popping up. Like, dude, we need to train more plumbers, clearly. But I think it's another one of those, we're so rich that it does, right? It's like literally most of us have terribly leaky houses and we don't care because our bill is not that high, right? It's just not worth it for us to get a guy out to fix that so that we pay $3 less every month, right? But yeah, we should do that, and then we can use AI more, right? Next one is golf courses. We'll come up here now and then. Nothing against golf, but man, it's a lot of grass to water in a lot of places. And now we get to the interesting part: data center on-site and off-site. So that means, because people often complain about that, it's not just the data centers, it's the emissions related to generating the energy that goes into the data centers. That's a very valid complaint. This is included here. So when I say on-site and off-site, this is the water usage to generate that energy again. And then at the end, AI and data centers. You can't see it. That's how little it is. Like just for the water to run only in the AI data centers, or the part of it that is used for that. Now you could make a good argument and say like, fine, but no one lives in the aggregate. What about the place where the actual data center is? Right? Be like, that's fine and all, but there's a data center in this little county and it uses all their water. No. So this is one of the sort of disputed data centers. Can't remember whose it is, but it's in Maricopa County. And you can see the big blue line there. That's their total county water use. Then their next one, again, golf courses. And then, I mean, you can't even see it, but there's a little bit of a blip right here. And that's the data center in that county where there is a data center, right? Okay, so far I feel like I'm very much like I'm on the defense, right? It's very much like, oh no, but it's not that bad, right? But you know what? The best defense is a good offense. And I think we need to think about this a little bit more holistically, because think about it yourself. When you use AI, what do you forego? Right? Like if you spend an hour messing around with chat, what else would you have used your time on? Because it turns out that basically everything else is worse, almost, right? I mean, like if you're gonna lie in the park and read a book that you got out of a little free library, maybe you'll come out ahead, right? But honestly, when I save an hour somewhere on something, that's typically not what I end up doing. But this one here, again, by Mr. Masley here, I like this one. It was very it's very useful for me. So what it shows on top here, this is the average American's day. Okay, so just like how much of it, the time you're awake, are you online versus not online? Now, this could be a whole conference about how weird it is that we are like half our day online, but it isn't, right? But that's the little green thing up there is how much we're online, right? Now, second line, this is our average electricity use, right? And you can see then on the left, they put together data centers for the internet, transmissions, and viewing devices for the internet. So basically being online, right? And then you can see it's not that much compared to everything else, right? And then on the third line, they say, look, it's not just electricity. There's other energy as well, mostly have to do with transportation, but some other things that go into making cement and fertilizer and good stuff like that. And you could just see it gets even smaller, right? So this whole basically when you're hanging out, and some of you might be happy to hear that, when you're hanging out on like chats, you're actually probably less of a problem for the environment than you are when you don't, right? And going back to that wine bottle, by the way, I'm not advocating that you should not buy wine, but I did do a quick calculation as well. Since it was a white wine, if I put it in the wine cooler in my kitchen, it uses more ChatGPT equivalent prompts per day than I do, just to stay cool. All right. So the moral of the story is, when you buy wine, you should drink it right away, because it's really bad for the environment if you leave it in the fridge. Okay, more water, right? So this is a big problem. Again, like we keep hearing, like, oh, it's hard to, like, we can see for ourselves. It's like, I use this much versus that much, but then we don't really know both of those numbers, so it's kind of hard to compare, right? Quite often we have to look more at the industry, right? Because you know what, sometimes, every now and then, there's like a new car factory is announced, like, oh, we're going to start building Nissans in wherever, right? And you generally hear people's yays, right? There's not like, oh man, that's going to use a lot of water in that county, right? But I mean, a car factory uses more water than a data center, right? So here, these and it is a little small on these screens. I'm sorry about that. You can find them at andymasley.substack.com. Industry comparisons. So thermoelectric power is the first one. Mining, forest products, like all these things. The black one in the middle, it represents 1% of America's daily consumptive freshwater withdrawals. The interesting ones for me here are further down towards the bottom, right? So the second one after that one is New York City. So in New York, they use 1,000 million gallons per day of water, almost 1% of the national, right? Fair enough, it's New York. There's a lot of people there, it's a big place, right? But then the next one is Phoenix. Not that many people there, and they use like 1/3 of the water, right? So maybe data centers, again, are not really the problem. Data centers on-site and off-site use less than Phoenix. Data center on-site uses significantly less. Actually, it uses about exactly as much as the US bottled water consumption, right? So we use more water that we schlep around in little bottles than data centers. And then the AI part of data centers, as you can see, is even less, right? We talked about agriculture, so yeah, there are a couple of there's some crops out there that use a lot of it. Have you guys been eating a lot of alfalfa lately? I mean, I would avoid that. It's bad. No, I mean, I think if I know my agriculture to any degree, alfalfa is mostly used for feed, right? So that burger we talked about, that's how we get to that number, right? But again, you have the 1% of America's daily freshwater water withdrawal there as the darker one, and then at the very bottom here you have the data centers as well. Okay, let's go all the way and say, look, as far as I can see, not only is AI not like terrible, right? It's not like out of the ordinary bad for the environment. And actually, quite often, whatever you would have done had you not been using AI would have been worse, all right? But there's some straight up benefits. Like, there are a whole bunch of ways that AI can be very, very good for the environment. Because you know who else uses a lot of energy? Hospitals, right? Auctioneer uses tons of energy. And no one complains about that because it's kind of obvious that it's a good thing, right? And I'm just like, I'm not saying all data centers are equal. There's a very interesting little case in my home country of Norway. There is an area where an ammunition company wanted to expand their factory to make more artillery for the Ukrainians. And everyone was very for it, but it turned out they couldn't because the energy needed from that power plant had already been promised to build a new data center for TikTok. Right? So then there's like ammunition against bad guys versus like cat videos and thirst traps. Like, it shouldn't be that hard, right? But anyway, let's get in some actual real benefits, right? So I teach a course called AI and Society at Tulane, and I have tons of students coming through there. We spend a whole semester talking about all the ways AI impacts society in different ways. And one of my favorite modules is when we talk about AI in the environment, right? There's so much to talk about there. And we go through all these things that we've talked about here, right? In excruciating detail. The students burn through the GPUs. I put everything into a notebook LM and have them play with it for hours, right? So we can find out all these things. And then my favorite part is we're going to talk about what about the upsides? Like how could AI actively improve things, right? So number one here, and by the way, these slides, of course, were all generated with the new Gemini make slides out of my notes function and heavily edited by myself, except the following two slides. I was like, you know what? They're good. I'm going to turn off my computer a few minutes earlier and save the environment and go, I literally went to that wine store then, so. So first of all, optimizing systems. Again, so people don't really know how much energy we use, but we certainly don't know how much we waste, right? Now, there are a lot of different data on this, but let's just say like a whole lot of energy is wasted before it even gets to the user, be it private homes or offices, all that stuff. And then just look around, like we waste energy all the time, right? Even those who are like supposed to be very good and care about this thing, I've taught Tulane summer courses every now and then. I get to campus and every single building is frigid and has all the lights on, even when I know I'm literally the only person teaching in that building all day for a group of 8 students. Right? So, there's some low-hanging fruit here, right? So my thinking for AI is basically by making all grids intelligent, right? You put a little AI pretty much everywhere you can. Of course, more and more we have, it doesn't need to be ChatGPT 5 Thinking Pro to decide if you should turn the lights on and off, right? There's so many small language models at this point, tons of them that I can run tons of them on my phone. You can run them on a little Raspberry Pi. There's so many different ways, right? So just generally by increasing the intelligence of the grids, starting with, the actual, power plants and the big grids and sort of all the way down into our homes, we can optimize these things, cut use, save more energy. And the really interesting thing to me is that we don't know this yet, but you could argue that it is possible that AI can save more energy than it uses, right? Because if you look at it now, it's like even this projected thing is like, oh, maybe AI will be 1, 2, 3% of the total energy use will go to running these data centers. And like, okay, well, what if AI can save 1, 2, 3% of our total energy use because we're so inefficient and we can be less? Then why are we having this conversation, right? Next, accelerating science. Just look at some of the stuff that Google DeepMind has been doing, right? Discovering new materials. And it's not just them, like all sorts of others as well. We know the sun every day sends, I don't know how much energy to our way, and a teeny little piece of this we manage somehow to like drag down and use. If you look at, maybe I should include those, but you've probably seen these crazy graphs that show how much better photovoltaic has become over the last, whatever, 20, 30 years, right? I mean, I just remember, like, as a kid, like, there's someone, they had, like, this big solar panel at their cabin on an island. And after a full day of sun, like, it could, like, run a light bulb until the next day, and that was sort of it, right? Um, I mean, solar panels have gotten very, very good rapidly, but that doesn't mean they're just going to, like, okay, we're done with that now, right? So using AI to discover or create whatever it is, new materials and I mean, there's so many ways of putting AI to use combined with organic intelligence, right? To just come up with new science that can make either new ways of harvesting energy that are green, right? Or just new sources of energy, or just all sorts of ways in which we can do the things we want to do without harming the planet in the same way, right? Some of this would just be basic things like we have this issue with energy is like you have to use it right away. So unless you have good batteries and all this stuff, I mean, like the technology, if we can just store more of the energy when the wind is blowing more and the sun is sunning harder, right, and keep it for the night instead of having to run some of these other baseload things. Which also, by the way, data centers are really interesting as part of the grid and balancing the grid, because more so than anything else that uses that much energy, it's sort of adjustable, right? And they know and obviously can use AI to model their peaks and highs and lows and adjust accordingly, right? And be like, you don't have to train ChatGPT 6 right when everyone is turning their AC on, right? You could do more of it at night, right? Also, conservation. I mean, the fact, I don't know, like from a human point of view, I'm not super excited about like a future where there are just sensors and cameras and microphones everywhere. And those same companies that you mentioned in your last, they have the keys to most of them. And that lovely government of ours has access to whatever they want as well, right? But for some things, it is demonstrably good, right? And Tulane is actually involved in some of these things. And I can't remember which. It's some country in South America where they use AI to analyze satellite images of the forests to the degree they can see what type of tree and what's growing and that kind of stuff. They have some sensors out that are filming and listening to the areas where a specific bird is mating and using AI to analyze that to figure out basically what they can do to help that ecosystem be more friendly for those birds that are only left there at this point and some of these things, right? Again, Google has this system now for forest fires, right? So not only do we have satellites that are constantly filming the areas of the U.S. where forest fires tend to happen, but they have sensors on them that as soon as anything bigger than a campfire is lit, it will be seen and zoomed in on and evaluated, and it will alert someone if that looks like it's the beginning of a forest fire, right? So I don't have to go into too many details. I think we can all see how it could be, useful and transform our world for the better. I was surprised. So in this AI and Society class, we have some discussion. At the end of the day, I let the teams vote on like what their big topic should be. So each team is assigned one industry that they're going to, throughout the semester, research the impact of AI on that industry. And I was pleasantly surprised. There was a team that said agriculture, right? That's not terribly sexy. Like the last time I did the course was the year before was the first time, and I gave them 4 just to get started. And I was like, movie industry, music industry, gaming industry, news industry, because everyone kind of knows that one. And this time, one of the teams goes like agriculture, right? And we've seen in some of the other data, obviously agriculture. First of all, agriculture, yay! Like we are for that. We want food, right? And it's good. And there too, there's some interesting graphs showing how much more sort of efficient agriculture has become. We grow more and more food from less and less land, requiring fewer and fewer human man hours and all that stuff, right? But it's still wildly wasteful in many ways, right? And I can say, like, I would much rather drink some water that came out of a data center than was run off from a farm, right? Because there's all sorts of stuff coming there, out of there, that's not good. And this is a fantastic area for AI to improve things. You might have seen there have videos online. There's like the laser weeder. I've seen this. It's like you put it on a tractor and it drives through the field, and then it films and it shoots little lasers, and it burns all the little weeds, right? Which is significantly more efficient than the other versions of doing that, which would be you have to spray them with something that's bad, and that will kill some other things, and will then run off and get into the water system, right? Smarter infrastructure. There's some data already showing that, I can't remember exactly how much, but a significant carbon footprint is removed just because we use Google Maps. I mean, we drive more efficiently, right? I mean, we don't drive around looking for things. We just sort of go there. When there's an accident on the highway, Google will be like, there's an accident. You should go this way. And enough people do that it actually works, right? If you care more than others about the environment, when you plot a route somewhere and they give you 3 options, there's the leaf on one of them. If you take that one, you will use less, right? And that's just sort of, now we're still humans. Now imagine the obvious future, which is all cars will be self-driving. Humans will no longer be allowed to drive because the data shows we kill people when we do that at a much higher rate than when the cars drive themselves already, right? So now if you have an intelligent traffic system where the cars drive themselves, communicate with each other, and communicate with the street lights and the red lights and all that stuff as well, just the reduction in how many times you have to stop all the way and then start again, and the energy required there versus just keeping the perpetual motion. I think just in this area, AI could potentially save as much energy as it uses, right? So yeah, net positive view. I think in general, it's easy to see how, like, okay, AI uses energy, fine, but we use more energy, right? I use more energy typing on my computer than AI uses typing it for me as it did this slide, right? So in conclusion, to me, I'd say AI is not a threat to the environment, right? I think it's probably the solution. And I'm worried because it seems most people do not know this. I'm worried because I think we're going to have a big conflict in society, in this country, and in the world about AI. And I think most people participating in that conflict will be basing on sort of, they will be misinformed about the facts, right? Which is very rarely a good idea. So I hope that this was a little step in the right direction of sort of getting some facts out and sharing some thoughts about why AI is, on the topic of the environment at least, probably a very good thing. So thank you. I'll take any questions. Yes.
All right. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff is based on reports by the companies themselves, and we know there's not like there's no transparency regulation there. And surely they're fudging numbers. As someone who's looked at this more, like when I do it, like, so I do what everyone does. I put like a multiplier in my head.
Yeah.
But I'm like, worst case, it's not 1,000 times worse. What, as someone who's looked at it, what is a more realistic multiplier for worst case that you can put on it?
I mean, I think that 10 is fine, for example. But it's more like, again, yes, it's not transparent, but on the other hand, it is transparent how much energy they use. It is, I mean, they use hardware by NVIDIA mostly. They publish how much energy is used because it's a selling point, right? And I actually don't remember the exact number for this, but same as you had that one with Gemini, is 33x more efficient than it was. These chips, each generation of new chip is similarly more efficient than the last, right? So everything is just more and more efficient, right? Now, to look at sort of the other side, we are using it more and more, right? So there's the whole paradox there, saying like as it gets more and more efficient, we're just going to expand our use of it, and it'll be a wash, right? So there are many things where I could say, okay, so I used to be a politician. I used to be like, my job is to persuade people. I'm not. I'm an academic. I'm having a discussion here. And I'm very happy to say that some obvious things to consider here is, for this whole presentation, I'm talking about like a typical ChatGPT prompt. What is that, and how does that change? Well, we know it gets longer and longer, right? And I know from that median in the Gemini one, they said very clearly that it was the median prompts, right? So the number of tokens involved, it seems in that one to have been accounted for. I would not expect Sam Altman to do that, right? When he says it's 0.34, right? So yeah, and that's why I'm saying like there's a lot of leeway here in the sense like they could totally be wrong by not necessarily in the order of a magnitude, but they can fudge a little bit here and there, and this will still be true. And at the end of the day, to me, it also is just about their incentives. I mean, energy costs money, and they need a lot of it, and there's not that much of it, and we have to build new sources, all that stuff. So I mean, they have every possible incentive to use less and be more efficient with it, right? Yes.
I didn't wait today earlier. I was just wondering if you knew this. Like when they're talking about the power consumption used for training Grok, like surely they're training it like 100 times in parallel, right? And they're trying to figure out which data set made the best version of Grok, and then whichever one wins that race will be Grok 4, Grok 5, whatever it is. Is that accounted for? Is it just like the power consumption to train the model once with the set like 400 billion parameters or whatever?
My impression of that one was that it was the total, and also all of Grok is one data center in Memphis, which was, and thank you for reminding me, because I meant to pull this up because I mentioned before, like there are legitimate concerns about data centers, and one of them, my main one, so I created this map, or ChatGPT created this map for me because I gave it a file and it said, here's the list, here's the file, here's my ugly map, make it work. You should put data centers where there is abundant energy and water and it's naturally cool, right? In reality, in the US today, you put data centers where politicians give you tax breaks, right? That's screensaver. And as you can see, and I mean, there's an outlier here, and you'll see it right away, and I'm sure nobody will be surprised to see which one it is. Actually, because it's not XAI, they only have one, and it's in Memphis by the river. It's fine enough, at least. But here we go. Here, the red ones here. Oh, so I'm offline, which is why the other ones don't disappear. But yeah, the red ones here are ChatGPT or OpenAI, Stargate, whatever. The official administration sanctioned build out. They're building. I mean, you don't have to know that much about the U.S. to be like, this place is probably not abundant in water or good governance, right? So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stupidity going on here, right? Because if you actually build a data center where you should, it should be not a problem. It should be good. Because that's the other thing, people complain about this new Meta one in Louisiana, and I 100% agree. Like, why on earth would you put a data center right there? And it's, politics. But when you put it somewhere it makes sense, people say, well, but it doesn't employ that many people. But the personal property taxes a company pays on the machinery that it has, when you put $1 billion worth of chips into a building, is significant. So if you go to Virginia, where most data centers before this boom here came up, then you would find that there's a county there that has 38% of its income, its tax revenue is from data centers, right? And then it makes sense because it is sort of a case of concentrated cost and dispersed benefits. Like there's no benefit to live near a data center, right? There is some cost in the sense it takes up land and all the other stuff. On the other hand, when people complain about like, oh, my electricity bill's going up, that's all hooey. I mean, generally, no one builds a like terawatt data center to plug into the local system. I mean, they build new energy for that. And if anything, northern Louisiana is going to be more energy secure than it ever would have been after they have 3 new energy plants surrounding this thing, and they're all connected to different gas pipelines and that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, sort of a lot of weird things you could say about data centers. I mean, they're building. So Microsoft's building a new data center in northern Norway, inside of a mountain where there was a mine, right? And there isn't anymore, but there's a hole and it's cold, and there's a hydroelectric plant next to it, and that grid has a surplus of energy because it's so far north, it's not even connected to the rest of the Norwegian grid. So they basically have to let water go over the dam, right, when they have too much because they can't find use for the energy. So, hey, that sounds like a great place for a data center for me. And it's not about the like super microsecond or whatever it takes, because it's just not like it's not the stock market. If you, especially let's say you use it for training, who cares, right? Next, yes.
Yeah, you convinced me.
Well, thank you.
But 2.5 years ago, when ChatGPT first, everybody started using it, and I have enough of a background, I could foresee what was coming. I stopped worrying about climate change. I used to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped, but I still hear somehow that AI is antithetical to the green economy. So why is that?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. It could be. I mean, there are a couple of things going on. Number one is like just like a reflex, right? It's like what's got to be, right? Like based on other things, why not, right? But I saw, for example, Bill Gates just recently came out and said, you know, he's been very sort of staunch on like being worried about climate. He's like, I'm not that worried anymore, right? And probably some similar reasons. It could also be one of those good old like when I see who's for it, I know I'm against it. Right? We all do that. It's rational to do that. It's one of the reasons I worry right now is because the current administration is very much sort of painting itself as pro AI. So obviously a lot of people are then going to be automatically anti AI, right? Because for most of us, that makes sense 99% of the time. Like, oh, Trump says this, yeah, probably I'm going to go with that, right? So I'm worried about that. Yes, I am. But there's some other data I saw really interesting as well. It's like all this digital stuff we're doing has gotten to the point where it now actually has reduced the number of physical objects we're buying, right? I mean, there's a reduction in the actual physical products that we sort of consume in, for example, in the U.S., for example, right? Like in a rich country like the U.S., we sort of peak product to some degree, right? And as well, I mean, like, this is one thing, but it replaces, I don't know, 15 different whatchamagatas, right, that you used to have. Like there's the camera, I mean, there are all these different things. So yeah, I mean, as much as you can say some of these things are inefficient, I still don't know why all my apps update all the time and all that kind of stuff, and why it happens right when I'm trying to use them and all that stuff. There's still room for improvement, but it's a lot better than like having to build a whole bunch of physical objects and ship them around the world and then put them in a landfill and get new ones. Yes.
Just as someone who's worked for like an AI company that was doing climate stuff, one of the issues, and I think like at least a little bit of what people are reacting to, is that it's just so early on and so many people have jumped on top of it that a lot of them are just not going to succeed. Like the one I was at failed, and like it's very very rapid. And there's a tremendous amount of waste there. I will say that.
Yeah, I think you're very much right. And also, I mean, generally, if people say like, "Oh, wait, this industry is minting gazillionaires," that's got to be bad, right? Like, there's no way all these people get this wealth and it doesn't somehow come from somewhere. Now, I don't believe that, but I can totally see from the worldview of most people with sort of a bit of a zero-sum game is like if they can pay some guy, you know, $100 million a year to be an AI engineer, then that is taken from somewhere, I guess. Yes.
So to summarize, kind of, from the perspective that energy consumption for data centers and AI is not, it's sensationalized compared to, overall use. One of the bigger barriers that we hear about is the build out of
You mean like that they're building more of them?
Well, that we're going to need more of them if we're not going to have the infrastructure there, and that's going to become a significant issue.
Yeah, I mean we're going to need more, and we're building them. And you're right, but I mean again, it's like it's within the normal parameters of building out. There's another good slide I didn't include from that understanding AI, and it shows capital expenditure on building of data centers versus offices. And offices are, it's been going down. Data centers have been going up. They haven't even met yet, right? So we used to spend 5 times as much on building offices every year as we currently are on building data centers. So again, it's not unheard of, right? And again, when you build a data center, as sort of you mentioned, you need that energy security and all the. I mean, you generally build things up for it, and it typically leads to higher energy security and higher water security for anyone nearby. Right? And unlike a lot of other things, I mean, it doesn't there's no soot coming out of it, all right? It doesn't leak oil into the river, right? That would have to be really weird if that happened. So yeah, but no, we do have to build a lot, and if you look at it holistically, okay, so then you have to do the mining for the rare minerals to go into the chips and all that stuff, and since we know that's mostly being done in bad places, that's a very legitimate way, right, to think about it. I think with AI, we could really step up the recycling of electronics, right? So when you have like a smart camera looking at whatever's coming by there, and they can immediately reference, oh, that's a so-and-so board that was made by this and that, and it has these pieces. Let's go get these right away. I mean, there's so much waste in all the old electronics that could be with a combination of sort of machine vision and thinking and little fingers and arms as well could be reused. So yeah.
Just as a follow-up, if then the need for these data centers is, significant, and that will be something that we see the build-out being required, and we currently have this issue with over-sensationalization in terms of how much AI uses energy as it is. Do you see a solution to kind of, what would the solution to that be?
I think it's just more people knew more about how little energy is actually used by AI and how much energy they use for all sorts of other things. I think that's really the best I can hope for at this point. That would be great. So if you can help with that and tell someone next time they say that AI is bad for the environment, you'd be like, well, actually it doesn't use that much. And do you know how much you use for all the other things you do? Right? Okay, I think I'm up for time, but thank you very much. And I'll be here all day.
Check 1, 2.
We got the same water bottle. What's up? What's up, people?
Hold on.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to write down the slide.
They're doing their own thing. Let me check again.
Just for the panel after this. We've got 3 panelists with us. Mm-hmm. 30 minutes.
So you're doing 1, and then 4, 5, and then 9, 10. I can hear you from there.
And 11 and 12.
There's no 11.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'm doing 32. And the housing authority. And the sustainability. So that's 4, 5, and 6.
Oh, no, no. No, that's 4, 4, 5.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I thought I had it in here, but just to make sure. And then 9 and 10. That's right, we're here to refute everything that was just said. What? Controversy.
Yeah, maybe AI is moving so fast that our presentation is outdated. Just half hour ago.
No, but that's definitely one of the reasons I love this conference. Diversity of views, welcome. Let's challenge each other to think more, be more sustainable. We're all on the same team.
So I think we're just waiting on the live stream to get going again. But I just want to say this is great.
We're good? Okay, we're good.
To me, this is like the third talk on sustainability of the day, which is awesome. The first presentation was on decentralized and community-run solutions. The second one had hard, great research numbers, and now this one.
Welcome. This is the AI crossroads. Is it going to be about empowerment or exploitation? This is Big Mike Sammartino, Johnny James II. We're live at No AI 3/2025, and let's get started. So, if some of you saw the schedule, you'll notice that there's been a little bit of a change in the name of our presentation. As we started to get into it, it just made more sense to go in this direction. As a sufficiently paranoid black man from America, I have concerns about AI and whether or not all of this capital flow is there to support the surveillance state or a more sustainable society. And it is my belief that in order for AI to be empowering instead of furthering the systems of exploitation and extractive resource utilization, we have to start thinking about a new framework for which to even consider whether things are sustainable or not. So today we're here to discuss a little bit of what we're terming the story of stuff in our digital age, right? We're gonna do a quick show of hands before we get started though. Who's worried about the environmental, economic, or social sustainability of AI? I see a couple hands. I see a lot of hands for the live stream who may not see, a lot of hands. Who's just worried about sustainability in general, AI aside? Lots of hands. So that's what we thought. We believe collaboration is the only way forward. And that's why this venue and this community is so important. This is where the essential work begins. Take them away, Big Mike.
All right, so are we building the next great dependency? What do we think of when we think of dependencies? I'm sure the developers in the room are going to think about the packages that we use to make software. But what about more generally? What about, like, did we have to wonder this morning that there was going to be a road to the Jazz Museum? Maybe in New Orleans, but more generally, that's not a thing we think about. Like, it's there, it's our infrastructure, it mobilizes our daily lives. We don't have to think about it actively. Is infrastructure limited to our physical world? We make decisions every day, say in the morning what we're gonna have for breakfast, how we're gonna get to work. Those are decisions we make over and over again. Maybe the same decisions, but you're also kind of following the same logic to get there. So there might be some variance. Those roads and decision trees, like those can be well worn. But in our minds, there can also be infrastructure that gets us to explore new solutions to old problems or solutions to new problems. These mental roads and decision trees, I like to think of them as part of what makes wisdom. We can go to the next slide. So, where's the wisdom in AI and its infrastructure? With the algorithms, I know there's innovations happening daily about getting better contexts and I guess memory management, making memory a little more human within it, thus making it a little more wise over time. But what about its infrastructure? Are we making those decisions about the infrastructure through those well-worn paths really fast, or are we taking our time to explore alternatives? What are we seeing right now unfolding with the infrastructure? I mean, we haven't seen this before. We haven't seen the tech before, but I mean, we've seen technical revolutions before. Right now, what's happening in the infrastructure build-out, it seems like we're relying on legacy energy. Is that good for the future? Is that really sustainable? But what's sustainable? Like, how do we define sustainable? How do we actually evaluate that? For that, Johnny's going to take us through.
Take a look at the sustainability tree. It's got 3 primary branches: people, planet, profits. We've all heard of this by different names. ESG is a popular one now. That's kind of displacing CSR, which kind of displays triple bottom line or TBL, right? It's the same idea that we have to account for more than just the financial bottom line of it all. And when we do that, are there advantages? Do we become people and communities and companies that are treating more than just systems, or excuse me, symptoms, but actually getting to the root cause of things? That's what true sustainability is. But when we deviate from these mindsets, when we deviate from these frameworks, what is the cost? The tree begins to separate. We've seen it for generations, this seemingly single-minded pursuit of profits at the expense of the people and the planet. And is the new AI infrastructure being built on that same unsustainable mindset, right? We see AI in the context of people and planet more now, but is it collapsed within that broken worldview? You know, I've heard many celebrating the meta plant. I'm a little bit suspicious, as we discussed earlier, but I hear jobs. Jobs are coming, thousands of jobs. I hear revitalization for rural communities. But I've heard these same promises before that ended up being short-lived and temporary and ultimately unsustainable. The crisis that we must deal with this AI power are these root issues around why our planet is unjust and unsustainable. We have to accept as truth, we cannot have healthy people or long-term profits on a dying planet. It's not sustainable. The house of graphics cards, the circularity problem within the AI business ecosystem. Have we entered another roaring 20s powered by tech? This is a chart that was created by a Morgan Stanley researcher very recently, less than a couple weeks old. And as we can see, this is a very incestuous ecosystem. It is as consolidated as any other industry that we have concerns about, from media to food production, you name it. We're looking at 6 mega companies that are largely in charge of the now multi-trillion-dollar AI industry. And what we see is a series of circular investments. I'm going to invest in your company, which is now going to then come back and buy my product, and then we're going to turn back around. Come on. What happens if one of these entities fall? Not only to the rest of the house of cards, but the broader industry that's not even directly involved with this entanglement. This is the height of unsustainability, and we're only getting started. This is the kind of speculative booms that we've seen before, and we all know how it ends. When you look underneath the hood, you see incentive structures that are designed around fraud. We have to keep the con going. We have to do whatever we have to do, whether that means blowing up false speculation around what we can do in the future. I'm sure people have heard recently Sam Altman say, we're going to be a multi-trillion dollar a year revenue company in 5 years. What? Are you kidding me? But if he fails, does it all blow up? It probably does, right? And then the question we also have to ask ourselves, is ChatGPT even the best technology? Or does Sam Altman just have the best relationships with money? Right? Right? So what happens if we're being led by not even the best that we've got? And the incentive structure of this money swamp, to use a popular term, is not built around sustainability. I don't care what they say on the TV. And many of them, by the way, have said on the TV, AI is probably going to wipe out humanity. Where's the sustainability in that? Now let's take it to the next step, because we could go on and on forever. But before we go to the next step, I just want to say this. I want to ask this. Are we racing to pour concrete and lay fiber optics for decades to come based on a financial house of cards? The answer appears to be yes. Someone asked earlier, they're AI comedians now? Well, maybe he's a prophet. Tell me a joke. That's the user's query. Simple query. Simple, right? What happens next? Network data transmission. This is our story of stuff, by the way, right? Like, you don't think about all this stuff when you just press enter on it. Data center processing power. 0.34 watt hours? What? That's not even a kilowatt. Who cares? GPUs, the computation heat. Yeah, there's a CO2 footprint for a single query. Need some water to cool that stuff off. We were just talking about that. Just a few drops here and there. Maybe on a daily basis at scale, that's millions of gallons, but who's thinking about that? A single query seems free, but it demands so much. What happens when you scale up? What happens when a single query becomes a tsunami?
So yeah, here at scale, we've only talked about text queries so far. There's image generation, video generation. Those are different algorithms, but there's still an immense amount of power behind them. Now this graphic, this is the country overshoot days for 2025. So by example, the US is at March 13th. So that means by March 13th, if everybody on the planet had the standard of living as the US, all the Earth's resources would have been exhausted. In other words, to support that standard of living, if everybody had it, it would be more than 4 Earths. That's plainly not sustainable. One country, so I mean, we see many of the familiar countries that feel like first world and whatnot. Japan's on there. There's China. We're on there. A lot of European countries. One country that is not on there is India, and that's the most populous country on the planet right now. Why? Millions of people live in abject poverty in India. Is that the trade-off we need to make to accommodate AI in the future? I think that's an unfair trade-off. Also, are we deciding it, or are companies deciding it for us? We have some numbers, and honestly, this is the most outdated part of the presentation, but I'll point out the question marks at the end. So those are like projections for 2030. 329 billion queries a day. These are all AI systems, not just ChatGPT. That would be the equivalent of maybe 91,000, 92,000 US homes powered for a year. Part of unsustainability, it's not just the environment. Those numbers, if we're led astray, if there's all this noise about the numbers, we don't know what to track, like that in itself is not sustainable. With these projections, so in 2030, there's going to be a lot more integration of AI in our systems. But do we have a choice to not make that a thing? Let's go to the next one. So AI is new. Our infrastructure build out, sort of new. I mean, we have data centers, but maybe not as many, and we don't need them as fast. Or we need them faster than we have in the past. But we've seen, we can study history and see that we've seen patterns like this before. Cars promise personal freedom, but are they responsible for a fossil fuel lock-in? Fossil fuels, they've, you know, powered progress through the last century. Has that created irreversible climate chaos lock-in? We continually trade attractive and usually profitable promises for long-term curses or side effects that are detrimental. AI promises intelligence and efficiencies, but are we building exploitative infrastructure lock-in? So lock-in, I've mentioned lock-in just now. We can go to the next. Like the path we're walking right now is the path of least resistance. On this path, we're prioritizing profit over people and planet. We can look at this problem as this lock-in problem as a technical one, but it's really human. When we get locked in, who do we lock out? What do the digital sacrifice zones look like, both in our physical world, neighborhoods near data centers, but also digital worlds? Who gets to use the tech? We've already, you know, with our elders, we've already seen smartphones kind of lock them out of some things in our society. Even though, I mean, I'm a millennial, I grew up along with the internet, but even so, will I be okay with every technological process, or sorry, innovation in the future? Or is at some point I'm just going to be like, well, I'm comfortable with here. Like, yes, say it's AI. Say it's more integrated AI systems in the future. I don't really want to participate, or I don't even get how to. What's that going to lock me out of? In this lock-in, do we see ourselves getting locked in with more sustainable practices, or is it just this path of least resistance and continual, you know, path towards unsustainability? I think that's old and tired thinking, and that's what we need to talk about right now. These conversations we've been having today, this is the most important work we can be doing about it.
The crossroads. The crossroads. Will we choose a path, or will a path be chosen for us? That's the question of our age, right? Path A, exploitation. More digital sacrifice zones, right? No water for you. Somehow, even though they're paying us to build this new grid, you still get to pay more. The fun stuff, right? We continue to repeat the anti-patterns of the past. That's for you coders out there. Y'all know what we're talking about. We continue to ignore the systemic risk. How long can we do that for? We already discussed. It takes 4.5 Earths damn near to live like an American. And you saw there were countries that were closer to the beginning of the year than us. There's some countries on this earth where it will take nearly 8 Earths for everyone to live like they live. If AI is not helping us address that, what's the point? Path B, empowerment. We build with nature's wisdom, biomimetically, right? We already have a field of study for this, right? What's going on? Let's train the AI models to learn about that stuff. See how we can get these efficiencies the way that nature has it, where there is no waste. Use that framework. Call it whatever you want to call it. But just account for all the cost. Don't pretend like this stuff is free because I didn't have to pay any money. Free doesn't mean it costs nothing. We have to accept that and move forward in that knowledge. We must leverage the promise of AI to face the challenges of our day. You know, that is one thing that is unique about this tool, right? It can help us address these things, but we have to use it for that purpose. Doing our research, we saw a statistic that basically said in a world of 100% utilization of AI, approximately 90% is for telling jokes, right? 10% is actually being devoted to trying to do these breakthrough innovations. We saw the tsunami that's coming. We got to grow that percentage, or at the very least, if we don't grow that percentage, we got to make sure that the people in these rooms are a part of that 10%. Final question. We will either be, it's not even a question, it's a statement. We will either be the last generation to inherit a dying system or the first to author the living one. So what y'all gonna do? Challenge. The code we write now is for our future, right? There's a different level of responsibility for you technologists, you AI engineers, you software developers. You are in the battlefield in a way that the rest of us are not, right? But there's still accountability for the rest of us. There is no way to absolve yourself of responsibility to act here. Command transparency. You know, typically you would see up here, demand transparency. The politicians work for us, yo. Well, we gonna demand people to do stuff when they subordinates, right? Like, there is no justification for a lack of transparency around the greatest tool of our era. You know, and apparently it might not even be that way for long, right? They got quantum computing coming right on its heels. We have to vote with our dollars. I mean, it's like basic fundamental action, right? Social action. Move with your money. If you don't like what they're doing, opt out of their system, right? Just opt out. I had a GPT subscription a year ago. I don't now. Opt out. There's alternatives, including alternatives that are in alignment with this worldview, that there's more to consider than just profit at all cost. And then build solutions. That's right. That's for the non-developers in the room. You got AI now, what's the problem? We're just messing with you, but no, for real, build solutions. They don't all have to be digital based. You know, this conversation right here is a part of the solution. Write articles, get on your YouTubes and your TikToks and whatever you're doing, just engage in the conversation, ask the questions. You don't have to be an expert, don't wait. Big Mike, he confronted that. He's like, yo, I'm not an expert on sustainability. I said, not yet. Let's get started. I'll help you. And here we are. So that's how it goes. Let's create with wisdom. Let's build a present that thrives. Thank you. Any questions? Sure. For starters, on the mainstream level, you've got DeepSeek out here being more efficient and using less resources than some of their other mainstream competitors, right? I haven't investigated it very deeply, but I remember a few months ago coming across an AI project that was actually about indigenous wisdom, right? And so there are projects like that as well. I've seen several projects in my primary field around sustainability, which is blue tech, where they're now using machine learning to address some of the issues related to our ocean's health, right? And to do some of those types of studies and innovations. But, you know, kind of I would just say, go where your passion lies and then see what's happening there, because they've already been there before you thought to, I wonder if they're using AI ever. Yes, they are. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the alternative is community rooted. I think transparency is absolutely necessary. Um, yeah, the thing about it right now is that um, we have corporations making decisions for us that we don't necessarily get any um, say in, but then all the effects are kind of spread among us all, whether that's environmental or socially or economically.
Dustin?
Dustin?
Hey, so I mean, a lot of corporations now, they they try to be somewhat environmentally conscious, right? They have a carbon capture metric that they're trying to do, and may offset it by some way. I mean, with AI, economies of scale, AI is going to consume more. Like, do we need to update that metric, or the way corporations are measuring themselves, or is it something else?
Real quick to piggy on Barry's question, I do think that there is an open hardware aspect to that solution, just like getting more into the ecosystem. I also think that we need to think really carefully about the balance of computational power between what the corporations have versus just what we as the collective people might have, or the nonprofit or government sponsored entities might have. So like that public domain computational power. But to your point, absolutely and yes, right? One of the things that we're sort of being positioned with in our private company, POH Farms, is like this sort of an aspirational blue carbon market that's sort of starting to come online, where it's this carbon sequestration but water based. And we've seen the first movers in this space are the oil and gas companies, who have a significant mandate, not only from government, but also from shareholders, to do something about their ecological footprint. And the solution that they've come up with thus far is very much within the paradigm of that old way of thinking, where they're saying, okay, we know how to drill. Let's capture this carbon out of refineries. Let's go out into the world, drill deep into the ground, bury this carbon, get a credit for that, and call that carbon neutral, call that carbon sequestration, call that sustainable. That's not sustainable. And like, forget about the environmental risks that have not even fully been established, whether that's, risk to groundwater, whether that's risk of like these fracking related type earthquakes, whether like the risk, who knows? We're not even considering that. We're just running towards, and I'm talking like Southwest Louisiana, Southeast Texas, hundreds of thousands of acres already leased for this purpose, with billions of dollars of credits on the line. They're moving forward. And if that's considered carbon sequestration in a world that's supposedly trying to move towards justice and sustainability, we're screwed, right? Like, no. So absolutely, we have to rethink all these things, because as I've been saying recently, there's a lot of sus in sustainability.
I got a question for both of you guys. It's gonna ask for a little bit of I don't know, your opinion and inference, but when you're talking about that kind of human centipede looking business structure, when when you guys think about it in historical context, or recent historical context, do you think about it more as like the dot-com bubble, or like the 2008 financial crisis with the circular banking, or some other real estate crisis, or what do you think of the resource nowadays?
Any and all of those. I mean, I absolutely, I thought about the 2008 crisis when I saw it. We talked about the fall of Rome, though, right? Like, there is no separation, but okay, historically, we look at any economic collapse, it was preceded by ecological collapse, right? And we've seen, now that the COVID pause has ended, we've gone right back to pillaging the environment, right? And this AI rise of data centers has happened on the other side of that unpausing, right? And we're seeing that the same way we saw it with the 2008. What happened before that? Everybody here knows a massive world-changing hurricane called Hurricane Katrina that completely devastated multiple states and some of the most productive farming regions in the country. And a short time later, what we already saw happen in the real estate market here following Katrina spread to the rest of the country. And it was, as you're pointing out, very concentrated few hands, but this was the difference that I noticed, which makes me a lot more concerned about this chart. When you're thinking about the 2007-2008 collapse, Goldman Sachs is going to be like the big elephant in the room, right? They created the default credit swap. But there were dozens and dozens and dozens and hundreds of banks all around the world participating in that scam. This is 6. The risk is far less distributed. It's way more concentrated, and the numbers are already exceeding where the real estate bubble burst. We're still on the rise. So yeah, I'm a lot more concerned about this chart than anything that I saw in the previous Great Recession and things before that even. And another thing to consider, and we can move to the panel unless there's a burning question that can't be saved for them. The overshoot graph. The way to think about that, like contextualizing it in your brain, we're using the Earth's credit card as opposed to breaking even, or even better, having a savings of natural resources that we could bank until the following year. That's what's happening there. And what makes this different and more dangerous than the previous era with the cars, for instance. There's about a bagajillion more people on the planet now. The stakes are that much higher and that much more magnified. And oh, by the way, we're about a century more into the deficit of overutilization of the Earth's resources. Thank you. Absolutely. No, I'm fine. I'm totally fine standing. And Isabella here? Okay. Thank you.
I mean, it just happened. That's why they're investing. Like I didn't come to the jungle.
Like you got a feeling?
No, no, but I'm saying like it does happen because they were
Oh,
able
for
to
sure.
disinvest. Yeah, and got right. But
How was that, everybody? Cool. Okay, now we're going to keep the party moving with a panel discussion furthering this conversation. We've got some excellent panelists up here, including a run-in from Professor Blaine Fisher at Tulane University. Thank you, Blaine. Shout out to Sabello, who wanted to be up here with us, but all good, all good. Everything happens. Sherry Currington, is that pronounced correctly? Perfectly. Sherry is ML, AI, superstar.
Can they please check their mics?
Yeah, check y'all's mic.
Check. Testing.
All good?
Hello, can you hear me?
All good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, she got that double degree because, you know, she double trouble. What? Beautiful. We got Michael Sheely up in the building. Y'all don't even know how blessed we are to have this fool here. So Sheila and I have been friends for over 20 years. We're business partners. He's the co-founder of POH Farms. And this is his first time ever being publicly talking about AI and or sustainability, and you've got him for both. He's an expert with deep knowledge in all of those domains. He's actually secretly the boss of POH Farms. The secret has just been released. Y'all already know me and Mike, so we're just gonna keep it going. This is free flowing. We ain't practiced none of this. They ain't got tipped off on none of the questions. Of course, Blaine couldn't. He just did the running, right? So he don't even know what's happening. But if everything's ready with the tech back there, it looks like we're okay. One more. Big Mike, do you want to have the first question after they introduce themselves?
Sure, yeah.
Panelists, please introduce yourselves. We'll go from left to right. Go ahead, Blaine.
So I'm Blaine Fisher. I work at Tulane University. I teach classes in AI and also do all the faculty development with AI and write on it and everything else I can think of. So a little bit of, hopefully I can hang with y'all on the sustainability part, just jumping in.
I'm Sherry Currington. I do ML development. I've worked at General Motors, and I'm currently working with IBM.
Yeah, I'm Michael Shealy, president of POH Farms, like Johnny said. I went to UNO for a little bit. Professionally worked mostly in entertainment, movies, TV, news, all of that. And, you know, AI, machine learning, and all things computers has just been a kind of a passion of mine. Right in there with the sustainability of it. And so, like Johnny said, for the last 20 years, we've been having these sorts of discussions of, you know, what even is sustainability and technology. So thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right, so let's start this off. It's a question for the entire panel. Our talk just now framed this build out as a choice between a path of exploitation and a path of empowerment. From your unique vantage points, what do you think is the single biggest lever we can pull right now to steer us towards a path of empowerment?
To me, there's only one correct answer for the adoption of any technology or practice, and that's convenience. Everybody cares about something until they're inconvenienced, and then they measure, do I care enough about this to be inconvenienced? I imagine that most of us took cars here today. We could have walked, and there's an obvious reason why we didn't. And so anything that doesn't leverage human vices like convenience or greed or anything else is doomed to failure, because people do not have the privilege of caring most of the time.
I personally have seen AI associated with the drive towards profit at the companies I've worked with. And I've read that training a large model, like say ChatGPT, causes as much carbon emissions as 2 cars over the lifetime of those cars. And that's a real danger. I've seen documentaries saying that by 2080, farmable land will be reduced, we won't be able to produce food, and pollinating insects like bees will be gone because of the carbon emissions we're already generating. And we're on the verge of our 6th mass holocaust. We've had 5 already, driven by volcanoes and the carbon they emit, but we're doing it much faster now with generating our own carbon emitting things, like the power used to train AI models. And from a developer's perspective, I've read that there are things that we can do, like using more efficient, smaller models, distilled GPT, or distilled, can't remember the name of it now.
You got it.
Distilled GPT, okay. Or using cloud providers that are green, that use green power like wind farms and that. Although I know they were talking earlier about that data being not necessarily transparent, so I'm wondering how green these providers actually are, like AWS and Google.
I find it interesting. Like I really like the example you gave about the credit card, because that is kind of like where we're at, but I do feel like I guess there's silver lining. AI can be like many tools that are as pervasive as this technology and being emergent as it is, can lead to a dystopia or a utopia. Depends on how you use it. And like you said, the money is what talks, and that's where it kind of comes in there. And so hopefully the question is, can AI pay for itself? Can it pay for its own space? And the way for it to pay for its own space, of course, it's going to have the fun stuff. It's fun. It recites poetry and does makes rap songs for me. That's cool. But can it do the things that are a little more a net positive to our society? Is the question. And I find that when constraints are in the market, or constraints are put on it in the market, things are becoming a little more efficient. I always think of a truck. My truck couldn't pull a trailer, or barely, and then constraints are put on it. Now they're saying you have to make it better. So now the truck's a lighter body. Now it's like a V6 and pulls more than what it was. It's the same thing when we're talking about a GPU race right now. And I think that's why DeepSeek was such a big thing in the market, is can they put out something that is equivalent to the time was OpenAI's O1 model, equivalent to O1 model with like less than 10% of the GPUs they had available and outdated. They were like 10-year-old GPUs. So how can they do something that was more energy efficient in training and build a Lamborghini out of Kia parts, which was pretty amazing. And if we keep putting constraints on the market to make more efficient, like I said, smaller models, but smaller models that give you the same power you get from more models, I think hopefully it'll get a little bit cheaper on the environment as it goes. But then how can we use it on the energy grid? How can we use AI? Is great at finding efficiency. That's its thing. It's predictive value. Finding something that's a bad or overuse and predicting a better use of it as it goes. And I think hopefully it can start buying its own weight by actually utilizing AI into not just servers for us for fun, but servers and like say energy or something like that, overuse of energy where it is and things. So hopefully I'm sad, but also rose-colored glasses in that aspect. We'll see.
We mentioned earlier in my comments that there's a 90-10 share of AI usage, where 90% goes to non-breakthrough tasks and 10% goes to breakthrough efforts. How do you all see this share of energy usage panning out for people, planet, and profits?
I think that usually the money is what they use to invest into the parts that make it a little more green and sustainable. And I think they're going forward with that 90%, so they can invest in 10%. It's weird how until there was a dollar sign of value that was something in for it, that we didn't really invest in something that was an alternative energy source. A couple years ago, in Pennsylvania, they reopened 3 Mile Island. If you're not familiar with 3 Mile Island, that's like was our version of Chernobyl, except nothing really bad happened, but a whole bunch of nuclear reactors we took offline, and Microsoft went to Constellation, which is this third-party company that opened a dozen nuclear reactors that's been closed for a long time, just to power their anticipated co-pilot infrastructure, among other things. But did it take something that of a consumer market to push them to actually look for something outside of fossil fuel, which is a very interesting thought.
As far as the 90-10 usage of, I guess, recreational use versus uses that might actually lead to a breakthrough that could make AI more sustainable, that's to be expected. Most of the time you get in your car, you're not driving anywhere grand. You're not doing anything new. You're probably not even going to your job to do anything that special that day. So I honestly think that 10% being used to advance technology or just the human knowledge base is actually amazing. I would have predicted it's less than 1%. And then as far as that 10% usage goes, and the adoption of AI, I really hope that 10% is looking for new hardware that we can run for AI models on. The only reason why we use GPUs is because they're convenient. They're there and are more efficient than using a CPU for most tasks like that. But they're not a good hardware solution for AI. And so the next big breakthrough is going to be a dedicated card that's specifically for AI, not reverse engineering vector graphics calculations to be able to use on this other hardware. As soon as that happens, the same thing will happen that happened when they invented GPUs, energy efficiency. You know, when they tried to render video graphics before they had, discrete graphics cards, the software calculations took forever and they were very energy efficient. The one thing that we have been good at with technology are increases in energy efficiency. Our problem is if we make something use half the amount of electricity, we don't cut our electricity cost in half, we double our usage. So humankind will always max out our resources. And so I do think that 10% is actually good news, because 10% of everybody's working life isn't progressing, humanity. It's getting through the day.
From a developer perspective, utilizing the 10% for what I think are good purposes. I think it's just a matter of being educated and knowing that you're driving a huge carbon footprint when you're using these technologies and using things like distilled GPT that are more efficient, fine-tuning an existing model instead of building a new GPT. But that's not something everyone is aware of. So education, very important, and voting for people that find these things important and will implement the change that we need so we don't further destroy our environment.
You got one? Sheely, this is your first public appearance on this topic. You see both sides of this coin, AI and sustainability. Where is the single biggest point of failure in the conversation between the AI builders and the sustainability experts? What do they consistently misunderstand about one another's worlds?
It's really going to come down to the definition of sustainability, and how all-encompassing is your definition of sustainability. Is it just that we're better for the environment? Well, that's not sustainable. We all drove cars or used some sort of transportation today. So it's not sustainable to single out any particular metric of sustainability. So if something can be scaled so that we can continue this practice forever, it has to be the default option for people that don't care about any type of sustainability. If their only type of sustainability they care about is maintaining their personal, standard of living, their own profitability, whatever it is, they're going to choose that. If you don't somehow make the type of sustainability you care about compatible with the capitalistic sustainability or just the convenience, whatever it is, you're definitely are not going to be sustainable into the future. Never in human history has a minority of people changed the world by saying, hey, you should do what's right because it's right. If we rely on people to do the right thing, it'll never happen outside of whatever we can grow that minority number to. And so you can look at every single movement throughout, humankind, and the only things that have led to any sort of improvement for the general status quo, the average person, is to take whatever the people that have the most power at that time and give them something that's profitable to them. And if you can shoehorn things that are good for you in there, that's the only way that you can possibly, get the best of both worlds, for the people that
are driving AI technology and software and the commercialization of all of that, and the people that are trying to save the planet and do all these other things, if it's not mutually beneficial for both parties, so that, hey, this person can make as much money as they want, they're both doomed to fail.
I have a question for Sherry. So you're building at the cutting edge, and the race seems to be defined by scale and speed. Does winning in the current race, in the current market race, require accepting unsustainable practices as a cost of doing business?
Well, it really can't, because it's not scalable. We can't go on and on forever like this. So, and I've heard the metaphor that we're basically building a house before laying the foundation, or building a skyscraper on sand. So I'm really not sure what the solution is, other than education and more discussions like this, so that people understand. You know, originally people were very afraid of AI, and a lot still are, but it's exciting now. Now that it's on your PC and it's on your phone, and all you have to do is use an application to get any question answered. You know, it makes you feel really, really smart, but does anyone really stop and think about the consequences of that? No, I don't think they do. But no, I definitely don't think that it's scalable to go on in this fashion. Something has to be changed. Using green energy, making it required that if you're going to have a cloud, like an AWS or a Google Cloud, that you use wind farm or solar. I've read that Meta's data center in Iowa runs primarily on green energy. More things like that being legislated so that it's mandated to take effect, I think, is the only answer.
To that statement, and this is for anyone on the panel to respond to. During our talk, we framed the choice as between exploitation and empowerment. And there is a current system in place of market incentives that incentivizes or prioritizes profit, speed, shareholder value, and it just seems observationally hardwired for exploitation. But is the core problem not a lack of regulation, but a fundamental flaw in the incentive structure itself? Can this system self-correct, or does it need to be completely replaced?
I think that that's a problem with any technology that's disruptive in the market. They're a disruptor because something that don't exist yet. And something that don't exist yet is hard to regulate. And I always tell my students there's a promise and reality to every technology that got put out there. Social media was a promise of connectedness. What's the reality? It met that promise somewhat, but the reality also, other things came with it. We can't ask those questions in this middle of this frenzy that we're having, which makes it tough, you know, because things moving so fast. And you see, and the incentive has always been that market driver, and we have to make those incentives for more sustainable actions, because people are always going to do that. The incentive that comes right back to them. I know in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and all in that area, they're on Saudi Vision 2030. That's their thing, because they know they're mono economy right now, which is you can go anywhere and poke a hole and oil comes out. They know that's not going to be sustainable forever. So then they're investing by 2030. They're on a mandate with incentives by the whole region to focus on green energy and AI, but using AI to regulate the green energy to make it worth it, you know. So I'm excited to see some things like that of positive incentives to make at higher levels. It's just hard to regulate something when you don't know what to regulate, how to regulate, and that goes outside sustainability, but everything that's negative that could come from it, the ethics, the morals, used maliciously and unintentionally used maliciously. I think it's akin to saying, I want you to be the person who makes the traffic signs in a world of flying cars, but we're just now doing it right now. Up, down, left, right. And it's almost trying to predict everything. And it's almost like you see the worst before you're able to do the best. So regulation's tough, but incentivizing is where you start brainstorming things that people will actually move forward with, you know.
Yeah, I think we're basically in the wild, wild west phase of AI, where it's just coming on board so quickly and taking off, and everyone's accepting it. But not many think about the long-term implications, and it's critical that they do. It really is.
You know, that's exactly right. It's coming on board so fast that it's the same problem that electric vehicles have faced. It's not the fact that we have a car that's electric that's a problem. It's what are the resources required to make that car? How are we charging that car? Can we scale that current technology up today so that that's the more environmentally friendly option? And I'll leave that research up to you to figure out what the best vehicle you could buy today if you cared about the environment. Spoiler alert, it's probably the one you currently have. But when it comes to exploitation, what's the other word you had in that? Empowerment.
Yeah.
The word exploit has a bad reputation and negative connotations, but really an exploit is just seizing opportunity. There's something that you have the ability to do, and this opportunity is the fulcrum that allows you to provide that leverage to do what you want. So if you have a bug in software and you exploit that vulnerability, you can now make it do what you want it to do. And so really finding any sort of foothold that you can to change the world is an exploit, whether that's positive or negative. And the way in which we can empower ourselves is to find the exploits that we can use to change the world for what we can generally agree on is a proper direction of resource utilization. And AI specifically, if we know that in the next, let's say, 5 years, there's going to be a piece of hardware that makes all GPUs obsolete for AI. Why would you build a huge data center and AI processing using GPUs if they're going to probably be 5 times worse, than from both processing power and energy consumption? And that's the biggest vulnerability in the graph showing the monopoly of who's in charge of AI right now is we have a graphics card manufacturer at the head of that, and graphics card's going to be the first thing to go obsolete in the whole pipeline. And we're continuously building new software that needs to use GPUs and building new data centers and everything else using antiquated technology. And so is there a possibility that you could convince people, hey, even though AI helps you today, just wait 5 years before you scale it up? That's not profitable for any company out there. From an environmental standpoint, that's probably the smart thing to do. If you can not mass produce the prototype, and wait for just the next revision of it, we would all be much better off. But when there's a demand and an expectation of perpetual growth, of perpetual profits, and then everything is, you have ChatGPT and DeepSeek and Anthropic and all these people competing with each other, utilizing for the most part the same open source software and resources. They're not sharing any of the discoveries past that in commercialization of it, so that they're slowing technology down by trying to increase their own profitability. And what they're doing is, exploiting the world and opportunity that we gave them to say, hey, you know what? We aren't going to demand this or whatever it is as a consumer base or as developers or whoever it is. And so no matter what, the world is looking at what's the opportunity that we can leverage, that we can exploit, and how can we use that to empower ourselves? So I don't see there a difference between, empowering and exploitation in that aspect of AI.
That's why Sheely's the boss. Empowered exploitation, 2026, it's coming. Okay. I just want to let everybody know too, there's room for questions from the audience. We have a few more, but if you have some now, start firing them away. First, right here.
So I'm curious how much this conversation on sustainability is really about like people versus corporations in general, and then where is like AI as a different focal point matter?
I think that, like you were saying, we're in this go, rush, and it's using the technology that's already available since GPUs just always been around, and then you have to exploit the company because they're the ones that kind of hold the cards in a way to get the sustainable practice. Because right now it's going to be rush now, go first, be in what we call, I feel like we are in the middle of our generation's space race instead of against the Soviet Union to the moon. We're with China to the race to AGI or something like that. Go, race, and they're coming up with TPUs and concepts like Grok with the Q, the other one of these chips that were more AI specific, processing units that are just, now we rush through GPUs and we come back later. Can we incentivize the corporations to do the other practice first? I do find that where therein lies the power will be something that will lead to the change we need. It's just incentivizing it in a way. I do like the things that Google's doing lately with DeepMind. I think it was like 2 weeks ago they got them with the company to try and develop fusion energy using AI, which I think is fascinating and is becoming inherently more and more necessary as we're burning the candle on both ends right now. And 3 days ago, y'all read the article. I wanted to Google, but I want to look like the guy that's Googling at a panel. But I think it's like Project Suncatcher or something like that, where they're putting AI data centers as satellites in space and using TPUs out there. So if it's a harmful environment, they're putting it out there, and they're using solar panels as the energy from the sun to come there. I mean, the investment they're using just to scale AI, you have to exploit that. If the investment is there's a regulation that says there's environmental sustainable, they have the money to make it work. You just got to make them make it work. If they got enough power to send satellites, 100 satellites in space to collect energy from the sun to give AI stuff, or open 3 Mile Island for nuclear energy, we have to find a private-public partnership with companies. The social contract we talk about is not just between us, it's all of us, including the corporations itself. And the question is, how can we drive that as a metric? As I mentioned with the trucks, we drove a regulation metric that it always has to be, there's incentives for it to get more horsepower for less cylinders or drop cylinder. How can things make things greener and stuff like that? How can AI's models get more for less? Is got to be a market driver, and we have to find ways to make it a market driver.
Even the corporations, just people behind the corporations relying on the planet just like everyone else. And of what value is profit if in, 2080, 65 years, your grandkids can't eat because there's no farmable land and they're pollinating insects. So those are the kinds of questions and things that people need to think about right now and be incentivized by.
And as far as corporations versus individuals go, corporations have more power, and if you're especially a publicly traded company, you have that fiduciary duty to basically be as profitable as possible. And then the only way that being environmentally friendly is profitable is through marketing. Or if your consumer base makes demands of you and says, hey, if you don't do some sort of environmental stewardship or whatever it is, we're going to boycott or do this, that, and the other. And so if you're going to talk about sustainability and the world and in any mover, you know, corporations employ more people than small businesses and self-employed people put together. All governments pass legislation and work with corporations more than they do with individuals. And so it kind of makes sense for me to, you know, go from the top down as far as, okay, if we can convince, you know, Amazon or Google or a big company to do 1% of change, that's more impactful than getting 60% of just people that care around the world as individuals to do something. And so it's definitely focusing for me more on corporations, but not targeting the corporations directly, but can we empower and inform consumers to put things they actually care about to the corporations? And there's been very few social movements that were successful to any degree that didn't get backed by some sort of commercial interest. You know, and it's just about those resources. And the few times throughout history that somebody that, you know, had the purse strings for a large company decided to go, the right thing to do, even if it's for future profits, but I believe in whatever it is, and they say, hey, I'm going to hire a group of, you know, minority people. I'm going to do these practices. I'm going to, you know, start a foundation that does, you know, public goodwill, but, you know, having some sort of corporate sponsorship of an environmental or social issue. And so it's definitely, you know, the same way with getting anything out there. Get kids introduced to it so that the kids introduce the parents to the new technology. That's how things advance, right? Almost never does a parent hear about the new thing and then teach the kids. And so to get to corporations, you have to make the people, their consumers, right? Tell the corporations, hey, this is the way we want you to conduct business.
And to add to that, you know, when it comes to working with the corporations and things like that, like you said, they have the power, and you have to be backed or sponsored and stuff like that. On an incentive thing, we also have to think, unlike everything else, we have to think globally, which is extremely tough, especially if you're in the middle of this, like I said, this space race-like mentality. You use it for the example of what's driving it is the incentive, but also the competitor. And the competitor could be nations and countries now. And a race to be first on top is tough, you know, when we want them to be environmentally conscious first, because then you're like, oh, you want to hobble me in the race. I know there's, for example, the copyright's been this big thing, and Sam Altman was last year trying to say we have to be able to train on copyrighted content. Why? Because if you want us to be ahead of, say, China, which is the other market leader, copyright's a Western concept, and that's a U.S. copyright. What we're not training on, they are. What we're doing environmentally sustainable, they're not going to be. So the thing is, how can we incentivize this globally? That's a tough question.
Yeah, corporations are definitely made up of people, and hopefully the data becomes compelling enough, right? Because one of the things that psychologically has been at play is this idea that privilege obscures risk, right? Like, oh, well, they're going to feel that first over there, we'll be okay. But we have to acknowledge there's one Earth, there's one ocean, you know, and if there's a hole on one side of the boat, yeah, one side of the other side of the boat's going to rise higher, but we're all still sinking, you know, and until we come to that realization, yeah, we're going to be in a trap, no doubt. Unc?
My question is, because you kind of answered a lot of it already. One thing that I've noticed with AI as it's coming more and more into our lives is that a lot of people don't know what it is, because everything's being promoted of what it does. Oh, we can do this, you know, you can fly a kite with AI, you can roll dice with AI, whatever. And people really don't know what it is.
right.
Yeah. But how do we do it? How do we help people understand first this is AI, this is what it is. Then this is what it does because I think so many people are jumping ahead of what it does. They have no clue because people think ChatGPT is it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, ChatGPT. I did when I first got on ChatGPT, but then when I started hearing all these other names, I was like, huh? What's the name of that one? How do you do graph? How do you do? So how do we do that? How do we get that first part and then go to the next step?
I love this question because it's my soapbox, and then I'll say, come to my talk tomorrow at 11. So, one of my favorite quotes, I think it's Arthur C. Clarke says, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. For 90% of the world, AI is this, that, it's magic. You know, and part of my soapbox is to peel back the curtain and we say that we did not saw the lady in half. She has a twin or something like that. It takes the magic from it, but my fear personally is that AI becomes, becomes self-aware and we all become slaves to the machines, which, even though it's not environmentally conscious, it'll say please and thank you a lot, just in case. That extra token just for my personal safety, maybe. But my fear is that too few people understand it. If too few people or no one understands AI, they can't use it efficiently, effectively, ethically, or morally. And I think that starts with the community. It starts with any place we can get it. It starts with, I wouldn't even say higher ed, it starts as early as possible. AI literacy, in my opinion, has gotten to a point that it is just as important as reading, writing, and math of what we're doing, preparing for a world where our lives are dictated around certain technologies. And then you need to know how to use it just like you need how to use electricity. You need to understand what its cost and its use just as much as you know how to, when your dad said, turn on the lights, what we're trying to do, light the neighborhood, air condition the neighborhood and stuff like that. It's the same understanding we have to have with AI too, This consciousness of sustainability that we've had for all technology that shapes our life, we need to have that same conscious awareness that is ingrained of us since we were kids. So there's going to be another technology that's ingrained as kids. I think this is a technology that we're going to a world where, say you bring your kid to have a surgery and they say, no, don't worry, it's easy, it's in and out, takes like an hour. I think for 10 minutes they're working on the electricity, so we might lose power. It's fine. We're like, that's fine. We'll just reschedule. You can't even take cash at the store because the system's down, because the internet's down. This is a technology we're being dependent on. We have to understand what we're being dependent on. If we don't understand our dependencies, we become overly dependent, and we lose ourselves with it and how we can use it sustainably. That's just my thing. Again, my soapbox. Sorry, 11 tomorrow.
And I'd say I think the best way to teach somebody AI is to ask them, what do they feel the most knowledgeable or experienced in the real world, and have them research that topic with AI. And then they'll see all of the mistakes it made and its shortcomings, and then realize, oh, I have to apply the same effort to get quality results back from the domain that I'm an expert in. So when I ask questions about things that I don't know about, I should try to have a strategy that can, get the good answers that I used for the things that I did know about, And so really showing people how bad AI is the best way to show them how to get good results with it.
Great power, great responsibility, pretty much, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh yeah, one more question. Yeah, right here.
So
Two more questions.
I think that's interesting, and one thing I'd like you to speak to. So yes, AI education is enough, but that is building on top of a tower of other things that we are also uneducated about. There's efforts to teach to get people to understand how computing works.
it's like trying to find my favorite baby. You know, what's the priority of each is and we have to first, as far as education, we have to make it as universal as possible. The reason why AI is so infectious and how it scales is because it's not as much computer science to their end as English. It's prompt engineering. It's just using that to its capability. That means we have to explain it in our education in a very relative term of how AI thinks and why is it, what are hidden layers. Nothing, you don't want to go too deep into the weeds where they understand that. They just need to know the general concept. Sometimes we don't know exactly how the sausage is made, and there's always going to be a little magic still to it. But if we say that, why does AI, I challenge them of the energy part, why does AI always have a unique value? Every time the output's unique. You send it through a wash. I ask the same question, it gives me an answer. I ask the same question again, it gives me the same answer. It's the same answer, but written differently. And every time I do that over and over and over and over again, it's not going to give me the exact same thing. I even put quotes in there, and very few times they actually give me the quote exact back, because that's how AI works. And let them know that the black box of the layers is a lot. And what I explain to them is how many of those hidden layers can be as you're doing that thought. That's where the GPU consumption is, the energy consumption is how much is coming up with that unique answer. And it says every time you ask it, in its big conscious, are you asking the right thing? Are you doing it for the right reasons? And sometimes it's just simple things, because you're not going to, the incentive structure, you're incentivizing someone to use it effectively and efficiently. Sometimes just using it, teaching them how to do it efficiently, for one, so they're not asking a whole bunch of things. I don't know how much we could probably save just by telling someone not to do a 3-word prompt, because the average human brain has 2.5 petabytes of data in it. That's about 1.8 billion words. The average large language model sits around 75 to 90 petabytes of data. And how many times someone puts a bad prompt and it gives them something generic, and they're like, that's not good enough. They just keep on doing this for an hour to get it, instead of how much energy they racked up if they just actually did better English from the beginning. Probably would have helped. It seems small, but small things like that is what every can that's saved and recycled, that is a net positive. And I find that doing that, but we have to lean into it too. Our education has to say it's not just how is AI used as literacy, but how is AI used in your field. And then when they go and use it in the field, that's what's going to drive innovation. Innovation is what's going to be the actual, there's no panacea, but that's going to be the thing that makes it more sustainable in the future, as far as environmentally, but also just to the human race in general. I do think, my hot take is, in 10 years, doctors are going to look back to what we do now and think that's what, in the Middle Ages, we used to train people for their bad blood. In a way, it's just incentivizing the innovation part of it. Hopefully, it pans out.
A lot of people who practice machine learning don't really understand how it works. I had one professor in my graduate program who said, he could explain backpropagation, he could explain linear algebra, multivariate calculus, and all the things that go into making it work. But we don't really know why it works, which is very interesting. But I've read that if you really understand a subject, you can explain it in a very simple manner, like a child, so a child can understand it. And I think that's what it comes down to as far as educating the mass public on AI and its implications for our society, is explaining it in a very simple manner to those who use it, so they can understand their consequences to using ChatGPT for creating jokes and building models that aren't really necessary, or a new ChatGPT 6 when you could use one that already exists. That's my belief.
Last audience question. All good? Okay.
The one thing I would say is I don't think it's necessary to understand how AI works or how lots of things work. Most people don't understand how their car drives, but you know how to drive your car. So as long as we can adequately explain inputs and outputs of anything that we're doing, from whether it's even social media or AI or cooking, you don't have to know the nitty gritty inside how the sausage is made to give people a simple understanding of how to get better use out of AI. Um, and then, and like you had said, there's the full stack of prerequisite knowledge you have to be able to use AI. Right now, you basically, you have to be able to read, you have to be able to write to some degree, or at least talk and listen. And so, as long as people can develop workflows for others, they don't have to be an innovator of knowing how do I, use AI to get a better research paper. It is on developers and the people that do understand to make these workflows available and easily accessible to everybody. So they can say, hey, if I prompt like this and give the AI these resources, I have a reasonable expectation that you will have better results than most, right? And so it really is like the more that we can dumb down and simplify the use of technology, the better it is, because the average user of any technology isn't the power user. So it's how can we make this as accessible as possible for the person that knows the least about that topic and everything else. And it really does come down to the community resources and sharing of knowledge, rather than trying to have a million different consulting agencies, each teaching their own course on how to get the most out of AI. If we don't have a repository of the basic principles of how to use AI and any other technology available to everybody, then we're always gatekeeping to some degree and having protected classes of people that have access. Even if the AI model is free, but you have to basically go to a university to figure out how to prompt for that particular model effectively. You're putting all of that technology behind a gate that is entirely artificial, and that's the big reason why I've always been like you said, like China, they don't care about your IP. They're going to train on your books, your software, this, that, and the other, and that's why we see so much innovation come out of Shenzhen and all of these invention centers of the world. And so I believe that the way that we help everybody out is by making that knowledge as free and openly accessible as possible, right?
That actually inspired me to think a little bit. What you said, and with the question, there's a lot more to it, and that's true. One of the things I think of, because I also teach emergency management. When it comes to emergency management, say for anything, any disasters, there's the salve later on, to get them there. When I was a paramedic, it's like you got to get them there with a pulse. You're not the surgeon. Same thing with say any emergency management. Maybe the vaccine is the cure, but you got to make sure you do quarantine, all these things up to there. How do we get that point A to point B? Because point C is where they kind of finally come up with the GPU fix, the TPU fix. They're going to use whatever's available now. That's not the most cost efficient or energy efficient thing, because that's what's available, and then innovate later on after the race is won sometimes. So it's like, how can we, and like you're saying, it's sometimes just get, to me, the vaccine at the end of this thing is when AI moves that next thing. We know AI is coming up with words or images or something like that, but the real innovation is the tool use that comes in with it. Cave people were cool, but until they learned to wheel and fire and had tools, then they started building things that were positive for society. And it's the same thing with AI, is how can we lessen the impact through the social contract of how we use it efficiently in education, because it's when it gets into hardware. That's when it's going to be in the energy grid to make the energy grid more efficient. That's when it's used for research, to do research things that don't bring in money, that doesn't make the fun headlines like the guy that married ChatGPT. How can we get the world with a pulse into a point where the AI is starting to pay for its own space? That's the lessening the gap we have to do. It's not going to be a cure-all for us and what we can do, but at least it might lessen the impact until that next evolution, if the next evolution is going to be something more efficient and better.
2 final questions.
First, let's get creative. Let's get ambitious. What's the Moonshot project for building something sustainable, elegant, and powerful, achieving all of our objectives that we're talking about? What would that look like?
How much time you got? I mean, the thing is with the way where AI shines is that the things we don't, it's like if you're environmentally conscious, if you care about the environment, you have to be wary of AI, and if you care about the environment, you have to be pro AI at the same time, which is a very weird space. It's a balance act, and the key is how, because AI works at that 90 petabytes of data level of things that where we might have been limited on how we could have found things as for research, and just the idea of where can we find efficiencies. That's where it really is. I think everything we've done in this world is inefficient, and fossil fuels inefficient, necessary, needed at the time, but it's going to be inefficient long term. We know that. And I think AI is one of those things that's going to find efficiency in any energy source we use, efficiency in anything we do. And think about all the little things that happen every day. The things that say was fun that we think we might not be great in environment, but think about tool use or anything that cuts the corner that maybe eliminates that one last email that you might have did extra. That other things, because everything is a domino effect. What AI affects also is the same energy you use it for other things around your ecosphere and technology. How is that going to do it a little better? I mean, we talk about GIS solutions. You can always tell, someone is still old school, got the mentality. You're like, oh, where I'm going? And they're like, okay, take this, take a left, take a right. If you hit the tree, you went too far. It's like, all right, just give me the address. That's how we. And does that make us more efficient because we're less driving around searching for things? It's the little things you can't measure that we also have to take into account with AI. Is what are the things we can do that cuts off a process that is not AI, but AI has mitigated by, we just couldn't measure.
I'll give you a moonshot. Takes 37 liters of water to produce 1 cup of coffee. Let's figure it out, AI.
Let me ChatGPT that.
I think AI is a double-edged sword, like a lot of things. It can be deployed responsibly, but I think it's a matter of building the foundation first before building the skyscraper, and having less of an immediate gratification perspective and thinking more long-term about the consequences involved.
Now that's a moonshot. Unfortunately.
I like the idea where you're saying about foundation. It makes me think of when they're building the house, and before they poured a slab, there's rebar inside of it so the slab don't crack. Are we putting that in there or just building the slab? And is the house going to sink and crack later because we didn't reinforce the structure that it's built on top of? And now what we're going to have to do, rushing forward, we have to go back, like you said, the GPU thing. We're going to say, now we're going to go back and crack the foundation, rebuild the foundation over again, and do it all over again, all the data infrastructure putting together. So it's hurting us in the long run to be faster than the other person. We've got to go back and reinvent the wheel all over again.
Yeah, and as far as moonshots go, I have 2 answers really. First moonshot is just any sort of ability for resource sharing. So anytime someone's looking for a solution and that solution already exists, they have access to it, right? We have solutions for most of the problems we know about sitting there. They might have been made in academia 30, 40, 50 years ago. No one has commercialized them or used them, and sometimes there's countries in the world that use a system that the rest of the world should use because that's the best answer we know of. People aren't sharing their IP, or they've solved their problem and they go, oh, I didn't even think about sharing this, right? So the first moonshot is just making more use out of what we have, deduplication of data, storage, and everything else. We could be more efficient. But then the real moonshot is you take all of the oldest industries in the world, right? Human vices, sex and drugs. Why aren't the companies that profit from these things today trying to do good things for the world? They're billion-dollar industries, trillion-dollar industries that do nothing but profit off of human vice, and as far as I know of, don't give anything back, right? So everybody wants to get inebriated in some way for the majority of the earth, and everybody knows that sex sells. So like, why aren't people incentivizing the adoption of green technologies with human vices? That, isn't the answer a lot of people want to hear, but industries based on vice is human history. So if we don't look at the reality of what humans do and figure out how to make what we do naturally sustainable, we're kind of barking down the wrong trees and finding solutions that maybe they're sustainable for 10, 20, 30 years, as long as you can keep a culture of people motivated to care about sustainability. What do we do when people stop caring, right? What do we do when people want to care, but hey, I got to get to work on Monday. I have kids, I have mouths to feed. Hey, I'm trying to get through the day so that I have an hour to watch the game on Sunday, right? If your solutions don't account for people not caring, you don't have solutions, right? You have hopes and dreams like everybody else.
Last question. This is a shout out to my good brother Samuel Birdsong, who's not able to be here with us. What does New Orleans have to teach the world about AI? And what does AI have to teach New Orleans about the world?
Public transportation and roads.
That's a good one.
I guess if it's New Orleans centric, we got to think of what is it that is a New Orleans centric thing that we have that is where we excel at when it comes to AI. And there's a couple things that I feel like that this state in particular in AI utilization and innovation could really teach the world, and that us being a port economy and more efficiency of going in and out of the Gulf and the bird's foot. That's a big one. The other is, I think, where we're probably going to be excelling in AI is our use and research when it comes to wetlands conservation. I mean, obviously, I'm a little biased because I work in a project, a research NAS grant in wetlands restoration and coastal engineering, and I'm from South Plaquemines Parish. If you met someone from there, I'm the other guy. You met all two. And every time I go out there, the water's, the wetlands have changed, eroding, we're losing it every day, and it's been more of my passion project, and I do a lot of the remote sensing and GIS stuff there. And I think the Google DeepMind project with Alpha Earth, if we can do word embeddings, they said, why can't we do layer embeddings of all the remote sensing data where you have GPT Earth? What is the average annual rainfall this year? Predict what the next rain is. Great for predictions and efficiency. What is this? If I stop this, would that close this gap? Would this affect the wetlands negatively or not? And we are in a lab for that here when it comes to the wetlands and using AI to promote conservation, sustainability, things like that. So we have economical just by being at the mouth of Mississippi, but also in a sustainable, positive thing in the world is how can we use that to change our practices of how we manipulate the wetlands, whether that's saltwater diversions might have been a whole bunch of manpower energy use for something that didn't work or could work. We don't know, but AI could probably help us find it.
I really don't know New Orleans that well, to be honest with you, but there are a lot of unique things here. I've noticed, I know we're in Dixie Alley, which promotes a lot of tornadoes and a lot of bad weather like Katrina. So that kind of thing can be monitored by AI and predictions made. And I've also noticed the roads, to me, aren't as good as in other parts of the country. So maybe AI could be used to improve transportation and getting from point A to point B.
Absolutely. One thing I think that New Orleans could teach AI and tech and everyone really it's a small city, right? There's not that many people that live in New Orleans, but per capita, there are more groups than I know of in any other city that I lived in, and there's more people doing interesting, unique, difficult things, and starting, everything from, no AI, to all of the Mardi Gras things we can think about, and all the festivals we have throughout all the time, and the groups that spin off from that. So from Mardi Gras and even Halloween and all the festivals we have, the seamstresses and costume makers and everything else that goes along with that is a really thriving, kind of self-sustaining DIY community of every hobby and interest that you can imagine. And I think New Orleans does more with less, right? They're more efficient than just about anywhere. New Orleans definitely has its problems that we all know of. But like we see from any place that has natural disasters like hurricanes or anything else that happens, people stick together and find solutions to work with each other, with the resources that we have, right? And as a whole, a lot of tech is very cliquey, right? And it's like, oh, I either am for this company or against this company, or no, we program like this. We're tabs versus spaces, whatever it is, right? And New Orleans finds a way to come together and promote the things that we care about in the worst of times. And that's really something I think that the rest of the world could take a lesson on.
You could use AI to help plan your next hurricane party,
And that'll be the final word. Thank you very kindly for being with us.
Hey, everybody, thanks for coming out. I just want to say a couple quick things. We'd like to thank the New Orleans Jazz Museum as our venue sponsor. We'd like to thank Excella as our lead sponsor as well. We'd like to let you know we've got some food outside. We also have a few corporate sponsors I just want to thank real quick. We have Crescent 9 is a sponsor. We have some Crescent 9 in a cooler out front. We have food for everybody. There's a little meat tray. There's a little cheese tray. Just a little lunchtime snack. We'd also like to thank Whole Foods. We'd also like to thank Starbucks for being here. They're still serving coffee. So we'll be back at 1 o'clock, I believe 2 o'clock. And go ahead and have some snacks. Thanks so much for coming.